Chapter 771. Aim at the boat over there and attack it with all your might. Zhang Hai looked at the fishing boats that had surrounded them. They had all retreated, including the two small boats that had capsized. Zhang Hai's gaze was fixed on the president's boat. As soon as Zhang Hai gave the order, 2 boats and 4 120mm water cannons locked onto the position of the president. Then, 4 water dragons flew out in an instant and crashed heavily into the side of the ship. The huge impact directly shook the ship left and right. Although it was very slight, the people on the ship were frightened. Everyone's face was pale as they grabbed everything they could grab on the ship. Their faces were filled with horror. Quick, run! This was especially true for the president. He wasn't young anymore. When he was hit, he was also frightened. He immediately shouted, not even caring about his son. As his voice fell, the people on the ship immediately moved. As soon as the boat turned, it sped in the direction of Boston. This time, Zhang Hai had no intention of letting it go. His goal was not to beat them back, but to let them know what pain was and who they could not afford to provoke. As soon as Zhang Hai said that, Edward Anderson and Marlon Rupert rushed over. Chase it! The speed of the boat was not as fast as Zhang Hai's boat. It was like a chase. The boat swayed left and right as if it was in a storm. Seeing Zhang Hai's ruthlessness, the other fishing boats followed suit and fled in all directions. Of course, there were still some people who were more particular. They rescued the president's son, who had fallen into the water, onto the boat. Taking advantage of Zhang Hai's lack of time to deal with them, they quickly sped back in the direction they had come from. Zhang Hai just smiled. He did not care about these small fries. What he cared about was the guy who had caused trouble. As they ran, Zhang Hai hit the big boat all the way. To be honest, if these people had not been out to sea all year round and had fought a real storm, they might not have been able to stand it. Even so, many people were already swallowing seasickness medicine. It was too swaying. Other than the swaying, nothing else was better. A lot of glass had been broken by Zhang Hai's water cannon. Some thin iron sheets had also been dented by Zhang Hai's water cannon. It was not an exaggeration to say that the entire ship was swaying in the wind and rain. When Zhang Hai looked at him like this, he felt quite relieved. On the ship, except for the captain, who was still desperately trying to control the ship, the rest of the people were grabbing onto whatever they could. It was too swaying. After more than 2 hours, their victory was in sight. Because there was a place in the distance that they and Zhang Hai were very familiar with. Michelson Green's Fishing Company. At this time, the people in the fishing company also saw Zhang Hai's 2 boats constantly attacking the boat. It really did not look like they were going to let it go. But if they wanted to capsize the boat, they would only attack one side. They should only be attacking one side. But now, they were attacking both sides. It was like they were playing with the boat. Zhang Hai's boat number 1 rushed over the boat, then stopped the water, and the other side rushed over. The boat was like a drunk man, swaying forward on the sea. Not to mention the people on the boat. Even the people on the boat were about to vomit. But these people were very tenacious. They quickly ran towards the shipyard in front of them. Because they knew that as long as they stopped in the shipyard, they would be safe. Zhang Hai and Michelson had a good relationship, so they should not be attacked by him. Seeing this scene, Zhang Hai's attack seemed to be getting wilder and wilder. It was obvious that they wanted to stop him from entering the shipyard. However, these people were determined. They sped up, and their boats almost brushed against the metal poles of the pier as they entered the shipyard. Of course, the boats were completely damaged. But at this time, these people did not have the leisure to care about this. They were just sighing with emotion that they had survived a disaster. At this time, the president let go of his hand and sat down trembling. He did not want to experience this again in his life. Boss, do you want to continue? Looking at the broken boat rushing into the shipyard, Edward Anderson could not help but ask Zhang Hai. Zhang Hai was also thinking about this matter. Then he shook his head. Michelson's background was not simple. If he caused trouble here today, although Zhang Hai was not afraid of him, there was no need to do so. Seeing Zhang Hai shake his head, the people on the shipyard also stopped the water. Then, Zhang Hai came to the bow with a loudspeaker. Let me tell you, the Soaring Dragon Manor's fishing ground was sold to me by the government of Massachusetts. That's my territory. This is a small lesson for you. If I see you in my fishing ground again, I will sink you. Standing at the bow, Zhang Hai said loudly. Listening to Zhang Hai's words, the people in the shipyard heard Zhang Hai's toughness. Since Zhang Hai could chase them from Winthrop to Boston, it could be seen that his words were quite powerful. After saying that, Zhang Hai did not care whether these people heard him or not. He directly returned to the cabin. With an order, the people directly drove the boat in the direction of Zhang Hai's manor. On the way back, they saw a lot of boats passing by. These boats were the fishing boats that went to Zhang Hai's manor. But this time, they were not as arrogant as before. When these boats saw Zhang Hai's boat, they would subconsciously avoid it. They were afraid that Zhang Hai would accidentally think of them. What a joke! Today, they had seen Zhang Hai's toughness. It was estimated that they would not dare to provoke Zhang Hai again. At least, if they sailed over again, they would have to think twice. Unless they directly used weapons, they would not dare to come over. But if they directly used weapons, did you think that the coastal patrol was useless? They were indebted to Zhang Hai. The money they paid was Zhang Hai's. Usually, Zhang Hai would also give them a lot of money. Of course, it was a donation. The Winthrop police station was almost completely new now. A newly painted building, 3 times more police officers than before, and dozens of new police cars. These were all bought with Zhang Hai's taxes and donations. These people's food, accommodation, and daily necessities were all related to Zhang Hai. How could they not work for Zhang Hai? Although the coastal patrol was not like the Winthrop police, Zhang Hai was almost their biological father, and Zhang Hai was almost like their godfather. Last year, Zhang Hai donated $5 million to the coastal patrol to buy 20 helicopters. Of course, 20 helicopters actually cost less than $5 million. It was needless to say where the rest of the money went. Now that they had a conflict with Zhang Hai in the name of avenging their companions, perhaps the police would turn a blind eye to it. As long as they didn't kill anyone, they wouldn't care. But if they used guns, not to mention whether they could beat Zhang Hai or not, the coastal patrol would definitely not let them off easily. So in the current situation, it seemed that they really had no other choice. Force was definitely not enough. Soft. It was probably even more impossible. Zhang Hai was famous for not being moved by force or persuasion. His temper was as stubborn as a bull. This time, they really did not know what to do. Of course, it mainly depended on the president. However, Zhang Hai estimated that after today's incident, these guys would not dare to come again. Thinking of this, Zhang Hai's heart couldn't help but feel happy. Boss, after today, these guys probably won't dare to come again, but we still have to be careful because these guys are likely to put pressure on the state government. It will be very troublesome at that time. Seeing that Zhang Hai seemed to be in a good mood, Edward Anderson, who knew what these fishermen were like, also whispered to Zhang Hai. Okay, I got it. Hearing his words, Zhang Hai also expressed that he would remember it in his heart. In fact, even if Edward Anderson didn't say it, Zhang Hai also smiled. This time, these guys suffered such a big loss. It was impossible for them not to cry a few times. It is said that the crying child gets the milk. These fishermen were like ruffians when they acted shamelessly. But when they acted shamelessly, they were like naughty brats. Moreover, they were spoiled brats. Zhang Hai had long been guarding against them. In fact, this time, he dared to do so because of the state government's words. This was what Zhang Hai was least afraid of. As the 2 ships slowly moved towards the wharf, Zhang Hai and the others also discovered that unknowingly, it was already afternoon. This morning, they woke up very early, which meant that this sea battle had been going on for almost the entire morning. In fact, it was almost the same. The sea battle had been going on for more than an hour. After that, Zhang Hai chased after the president's ship for more than 2 hours. In total, it had been 3 hours, and there was still more than an hour to go. At this time, it was already past noon, and it was already afternoon. Zhang Hai and the others were in a state of mental collapse, so they didn't feel it. But now that they were relaxed, they felt a little tired, a little hot, and most importantly, hungry. Okay, let's speed up. I'll ask my family to prepare a delicious meal. Today is a great victory. We must celebrate. Looking at the people around him who were equally tired but in good spirits, Zhang Hai smiled and picked up the satellite phone to inform Qijie and the others at home that they were safe. Then, he told them to prepare a celebration feast. After hearing Zhang Hai's words, Qijie, Qiya, and the others also moved together. Later, after thinking for a while, They told Zhang Hai that instead of just celebrating with the fishermen, it would be better to call Robbins Garcia and the others over at night, as well as Dulles Gerard and O'Connor Murphy. Everyone would have a good time together. After hearing their proposal, Zhang Hai was also full of praise. Then, on the way back, they deliberately set a net. Of course, this net was not used to catch ordinary small fish, but to catch big fish. They were all experts in this. After the net was set, a yellowfin tuna weighing more than 50 kilograms appeared in the net. In addition, there were some scattered American redfish and salmon. Zhang Hai picked 2 strong salmon and the tuna, and then threw the other fish back into the sea. These few fish were enough. After returning to the dock, they set some crab cages and shrimp cages. Logically speaking, these things would only be effective after a night. But Zhang Hai's place could not be judged according to common sense. For example, Zhang Hai stuffed some grass in it. After putting the cages in place, Zhang Hai and the others returned to Zhang Hai's villa. There was an empty space there, which was specially set aside by Zhang Hai for barbecue in the wild. After eating some steak and bread that Chia made during this period of time, Edward Anderson and the others packed up together. They threw the beer and wine into the huge freezer where Zhang Hai usually stored the meat. Then, they went to the forest behind and brought back some firewood. In the afternoon, Dulles Gerard and O'Connor Murphy came back first. They also brought back a few bottles of beer and wine. Of course, this wine was only for those who knew how to drink. It was mainly women who drank it. Otherwise, these few bottles would not be enough for the cowboys and fishermen. In the evening, after Robbins Garcia and the others drove the cattle into the cowshed, they killed a goat and brought it with them. The fire was also ready. Chi Jie and the others did not stay idle in the afternoon. They marinated a lot of steaks, beef, meatballs, sausages, and made a lot of salads. The meat was skewered with iron filaments. Whatever they wanted to eat, they could just take it and roast it. Philemon Turner's wife also brought a lot of snacks from home. For a while, the banquet was quite sumptuous. After 7 o'clock in the evening, the sun set and the bonfire lit up half of the sky. With Zhang Hai's order, the celebration party began. Tonight, at least for the first half of the night, it would be quite noisy. Fortunately, Zhang Hai had his own courtyard, so no one would hear or disturb him. Just as the banquet on his side was going well, everyone was eating meat and drinking wine. In a bar in Boston, it was very gloomy and depressed. Sitting in the most conspicuous position at the bar was a father and son. Although the father was now dry and refreshed, he still looked very embarrassed. He was holding a glass in his hand, but it was shaking all the time. The son was even more embarrassed at this time. His chest was wrapped with a bunch of bandages. When he raised his hand and breathed, he grimaced in pain. "This time we lost." Picking up the glass and drinking half of it, the president said helplessly. "Yes, President, this Zhang Hai is really not a human. He actually hit us with a water cannon and even hit us. This guy. Rich but heartless. He really should go to hell." Hearing the president's words, someone next to him said, "No matter how these fishermen say that Zhang Hai is wrong, Zhang Hai is wrong, and Zhang Hai is not good. But the fact is the fact. They lost to Zhang Hai, lost to his manner. Now, even if they curse a hole in the sky, they can't do anything about it." At this time, the president's son was no longer clamoring. Because today he almost died. He knew that Zhang Hai was not the kind of person who could be intimidated by threats. He knew that Zhang Hai would really kill people. This time, he was able to keep his life. But what about the next time? It is said that people will grow up after experiencing life and death. It seems that this son has really grown up at this time. This time we lost, but we can't just admit it. We suffered a heavy loss this time. No matter what, we have to let Zhang Hai give us an explanation. Tomorrow, we will go to the Massachusetts state government and ask for an explanation. After drinking the wine in the glass, the president's eyes revealed a sense of helplessness and unwillingness. At the beginning, the government took the initiative to take over this matter, but they did not agree. Because they thought that a Hua Xia alone in a foreign land, they just wanted to find a reason to find fault with him. So what if he is a rich man? Just like a great man in Hua Xia, Zhang Hai's hometown, said, "Let him hide in the Sea of People's War." But who knew? This guy didn't play by the rules at all. He doesn't care about the people's support, he doesn't care about falling out with the people, and he doesn't care about maintaining his own face. Such a person, sigh. There is no way. Since that was the case, they might as well give in and see if they could get some money back. Otherwise, they wouldn't have any money to repair their boats. This time, almost everyone's boats were damaged in different ways. This didn't even include the 2 lives that were lost in it. Thinking of this, all the fishermen can't help but sigh. This is not the script they wanted before. No matter what these people think, Zhang Hai played until midnight, and he also drank a lot. After the people left, he went back to the room with the women. Needless to say, Zhang Hai didn't fall asleep until dawn. But don't think that he slept very late. In fact, he woke up very early. He got up at 10 o'clock. It wasn't because he wanted to go to the toilet, but because his phone kept ringing. Hey, wait a minute. Rubbing his hair, Zhang Hai glanced at the phone. The caller was none other than Moses Adams. After picking up, Zhang Hai glanced around. Except for Delina, Marian, Azalina, and Galina, the others were around him. They were all naked, and there were more or less some traces of last night. In order not to disturb them, Zhang Hai slowly got up, then walked to the first floor with a bath towel wrapped around him. He sat on the toilet on the first floor and picked up the phone. He was going to take a shower directly after the call. He has a problem. After waking up, it is easy to fall asleep again, so he was also ready to get up. At most, he will go to bed early tonight. Anyway, Zhang Hai stayed at home all day long, and he had nothing to do. Moses, what's the matter? Sitting on the toilet, Zhang Hai took a long breath and asked Moses Adams on the phone. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Moses Adams couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. Indeed, disturbing the boss in the morning is really not something a subordinate should do, but he has 2 important things now, and he needs to talk to Zhang Hai about them. Boss, I'm really sorry to disturb your sleep, but now there are 2 things here. You have to give me instructions. Listening to Zhang Hai's voice, Moses Adams said to him over the phone. Go ahead. Hearing that he really has something to do, although Zhang Hai is a little angry, he will not vent it on his own people. The first thing is still those people from the Fisheries Association. Those people went to the Massachusetts government early this morning and sued you. Of course, they said a lot of crimes, such as murder, persecution of fishermen, land enclosure, and so on, but these things are not valid. The state government is not stupid, so the state government did not give any reason, but according to the state government, you asked for some money as a token of appreciation. Listening to Zhang Hai's words, Moses Adams also said to Zhang Hai. What do you mean by the politicians there? Although very reluctant, Zhang Hai knows that these guys are best at smoothing things over. Unlike him, these people need people's support, so they definitely can't push him to the opposite side of the people. Otherwise, they won't have anything to do with the next election. Although Zhang Hai didn't need to do anything, after all, he was still in Massachusetts. There were some things that he still had to do. So it was good to listen to what those people had to say. They mean that you should pay some money, $100,000. After thinking about it, Moses Adams said to Zhang Hai. I'll give you a quota of 200,000. Let those guys never bother me in the future. Otherwise, I'll spend another 2 million to buy their lives. Zhang Hai is also sleepy now and said to Moses Adams. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Moses Adams also smiled. He knows that Zhang Hai is not joking, he is serious. There is a second thing, Google sent a letter. The fisherman's matter here is trivial. In Moses Adams' view, the most important thing is actually from Google. Google is recognized as the largest search engine in the world. Even if Google was cheated and forced to withdraw from Huaxia, Baidu also recognized this in the encyclopedia, so there is nothing to say. Everyone said that Google's failure to enter Huaxia was because of Baidu, but in fact, it was mainly related to Google. In addition to the search engine, Google also does a lot of things. One of them is called Google Maps. This map requires the use of satellites to scan the real world's location, etc. However, these things would never be approved by the Huaxia government. After all, if an American company were to know everything about Huaxia's territory, who would take responsibility if something were to happen? So, Google's failure to enter Huaxia can also be said to be caused by themselves. But Google is indeed Google. After their failure to enter Huaxia, they still made a lot of changes. When it comes to the IT industry, the biggest giant is naturally Microsoft, followed by Apple, which rose to become a supergiant in 10 years. Before that, Google had always been the third, but they did not follow the prescribed order. Many people might not know that Android, which is competing with Apple's ISO system, is actually developed by Google. Currently in the world, other than ISO's Apple operating system and Microsoft's Win operating system, almost 90% of the mobile phones on the market were using Android operating system. In this regard, just the copyright tax alone was enough. As for the AI system, it was obvious that they were at the forefront of the world. In November 2015, Google's unmanned AI business manager revealed that they will launch drone delivery service in 2017. This proves that Microsoft, which specializes in PC, is no match for Google when it comes to AI. Of course, Google is also no match for Microsoft when it comes to PC hacking. After Steve Jobs passed away, Apple no longer has anyone who can compete with them. While Zhang Hai was fighting with the fishermen yesterday, in Mountain View, California, Santa Clara County, California. In the city's most famous landmark, the Google building, the 43-year-old co-founder of Google, Larry Page, walked into his office and threw his clothes on the sofa. His secretary picked up the clothes and hung them neatly on the hanger. However, Larry Page acted as if he didn't see it. He lowered his head and walked quickly to his desk. There is a stack of papers on his desk. It is about a technology, no, it is a game's progress option. Larry Page frowned as he looked at the stack of reports. To be honest, he hated the words written on them. Larry, the new director, sent a letter. While Larry Page was deep in thought, a man with a white beard walked in. If anyone from Google is around, they will recognize this man. He is Larry Page's good friend and one of the founders of Google, Sergey Brin. The two of them were in the same year and were good friends from the same school. Although one is American and the other is Russian, they are very close. The new director? Oh, the director who owns 2% of the shares? After hearing Sergey's words, Larry Page looked away from the stack of reports and asked Sergey with a puzzled look on his face. That's him. But this guy is really mysterious. I only know that his name is Hai Jiang. Oh, according to the language of his homeland, he should be called Jiang Hai. He's a Chinese and lives in Winthrop. Hearing Larry Page's words, Sergey sat across from him and looked at him with a smile. Did the director say when he would come over to claim the shares? Larry Page asked casually when he heard Sergey's words. It's only 2% of the shares. To be honest, they don't care about it. After all, the two of them relied on this to make a fortune. Each of them now has a net worth of more than 20 billion. They really don't care about 2% of the shares, but this is still a force that needs to be united. No, it seems that this person is not in a hurry at all, but he has already made his position clear. He has no interest in the shares. He handed over the voting rights of these shares to us. He just wants dividends. According to his lawyer, maybe he will come to take a look in the winter. Sergey shrugged and was quite curious about Jiang Hai. This guy is really interesting. He was a little surprised when he heard Sergey's words from Moses Adams. He remembered that the last time, the person who owned these shares was a very annoying guy. That guy really thought that he could do something with his shares, so he was very arrogant. Of course, after being hit by reality, this person became honest. And now, the new owner of the shares seems to be more interesting than that guy. Still having a headache about this direction? When Larry Page looked up, Sergey glanced at the document in front of him. In fact, he also has a copy of this document in his room, but he was too lazy to think about it. Those old people have always thought that virtual reality, VR, is the future development direction. Just like in some online novels, people can wear a helmet and enter a virtual world. But what I want to say is that this kind of technology is not desirable. Earth is our Earth. This world is our world. We don't want to change this world, but we want to think about how to escape from this world. This approach is really naive. So I want to prove to them that increasing AR is our future. Larry Page muttered as he looked at the report in his hand. That's up to you. I'll listen to you completely. However, it was obvious that Sergey Brin wouldn't go against him. He might not be convinced by anyone in terms of technology, but he was convinced by Larry Page. After all, everything he had was given to him by Larry Page. By the way, I remember that our new director is quite young. Since he supports me, let him try out our new product. Larry Page couldn't help but smile. Then, he seemed to have remembered something, and he spoke to Sergey Brin. After he spoke, Google sent an email that afternoon. And this email at this time was lying in Jiang Hai's phone. What the hell is this? Jiang Hai looked at the new software installed in the email on his phone. He opened it with some confusion. Jiang Hai also verified his Google account. Then, after a start, he entered the game. However, in the game, 3 little guys appeared next to his character. As a child, Jiang Hai still recognized these 3 little guys. They were Little Fire Dragon, Wonderful Frog, and Jenny Turtle. Is this Pokemon? Jiang Hai looked at the image in front of him. He hesitated and clicked on Little Fire Dragon. In an instant, the image flashed and his phone's camera was turned on. On the tile floor opposite him, a red bald little animal was looking at him with a pair of cute big eyes. Chapter 772. Pokemon Go was a mobile RPG game developed by Nintendo, the Pokemon Company, and Google. It was an augmented reality pet training RPG game. In China, it was also known as Pokemon. As for why it was called that, those who had played Emerald Leaf and Emerald Gem would know very well. Jiang Hai hated Japan. He hated the culture, the customs, the politics, and the people there. But there were also a few things that he ignored. People were like this. For some things they liked, they would always ignore where it came from. For example, some teachers who are good at both their skills and morals. Although Jiang Hai has a lot of women, it is understandable for him to watch porn occasionally. He also likes some anime. He likes Naruto and Shinigami, but he likes One Piece. He also likes Dragon Ball, Saint Seiya, Slam Dunk, etc. He also likes the popular One Punch Man. As for games, there are not many people who have not played Japanese games before. For example, the famous Live Football, Silent Hill, Capcom's Lock, Resident Evil, Street Fighter, Dinosaur Crisis, Monster Hunter, Devil May Cry, Sega's Total War, House of Death, Sonic, etc. Although Huaxia people hate Japan, almost all Huaxia people will be familiar with Japanese things. That's why when you go to a bar to drink Rio at night, Rio is from Japan. Some university students, like Jiang Hai in the past, eat instant noodles. Master Kang's main shares are also from Japan. This includes all the online shopping platforms and communication platforms used in China. When Jiang Hai started his business, he had received venture capital from Japan. Jiang Hai is not sure if there are any online shopping platforms now, but he thinks there should be some. After all, those platforms are very profitable. Secondly, even if Feng Yu does not want to admit it, Japan has the highest number of cars in China. That's why Huaxia people are in a dilemma. They want to boycott Japanese products, but most of them cannot live without these things. Jiang Hai used to be an angry young man in the past. But now, he is much calmer, even though he still hates Japan. But when it comes to some Japanese products, he will still use them. Of course, if there is a substitute, he will use it. For example, European products or US products. But what's the difference between US products and Japanese products? In any case, in the eyes of some people in China, Japan was evil. As the opposite of China, America was naturally evil, and Europe was naturally evil as well. The only countries that were not evil were probably countries like Pakistan and the like. Of course, the above was just a joke. But now, Jiang Hai is playing this game. He is addicted to it. On July 7th, this game will be released in Oceania, which is Australia and New Zealand. Once the game is released, it becomes popular all over the world. All the websites and dating platforms are talking about this game. At first, Jiang Hai didn't pay much attention to it. After all, he didn't leave the house. But since Google sent him the game, he found that he was addicted to playing games like he was in junior high school. For the children in China, there were very few people who didn't know about the Pokemon brand. Of course, everyone knew that it was mainly because of an animated film. But this animated film was actually for the sake of gaming. Just like the Digimon anime, the pet sprite was a game first before the anime. Jiang Hai had played this game before. But his family's financial condition does not allow him to buy GB or GBA games when he was in school. That's why he had only borrowed his classmate's game console to play. When he grew up and got a computer, he had also downloaded the game's emulator on his computer. That's why he is quite familiar with this game. But this game is different from the previous games. This game is not to be played at home. Instead, it is to be played outside. After all, this game is connected to Google Maps. After walking outside, you can use the Pokeball to capture Pokemon. From there, you can gain experience and an item called the Lollipop. This item is specially made for the Pokemon to level up and evolve. It is not like the previous games where you have to beat the Pokemon half to death before you can capture it. This is purely based on luck. The war between the players is mainly near the dojos. Joining a different faction and becoming the dojo master is not a bad choice. Other than that, there are many supply points on the game map. Once you enter the supply points, you can get Pokeballs and other items. It is not bad. Zhang Hai is playing here. Naturally, he asked his friends in China to play as well. However, most of the places in China are already in the trivia area. Maybe it is because the country does not allow Google to enter. But there are some places that are not in the trivia area. For example, the 3 provinces in the northeast and part of Meng province. But these places are not like overseas. According to Zhang Hai's good friend Xueqi, there are Pokemon in the city, but there are only dojos and supply points in the city center. Outside the city, there are no Pokemon. It is a complete blank. No one knows when the local area will be opened. But this has nothing to do with Zhang Hai. Because at this time, he is having a good time in the United States. Every morning when he wakes up, he takes his phone and walks around his manor. The usually lazy Zhang Hai has disappeared. This surprised Qi Jie and the others, but after seeing him play this game, they also played it out of curiosity. After that, Zhang Hai is not the only one who is addicted. Every day, they will walk around the manor. And most importantly, Zhang Hai's luck is not bad. The most important thing about this game is that it is realistic. Only places with water will have water-type Pokemon. Only places with mountains will have earth-type Pokemon. So, Zhang Hai's manor has everything. There is grass, forest, and sea. Although there are no dojos or supply points in this area, there is quite a variety of Pokemon. In addition, Zhang Hai is Google's client. In order to let Zhang Hai better experience this game, Google specially gave Zhang Hai a pet egg. A pet egg that will definitely hatch a mini dragon. This is considered a benefit. These days, Zhang Hai has caught a lot of Pokemon in his manor. Among them, his main pet is Charmander. It is still Charmander. And it is still Charmander. There is no spawning ground for Charmander on his side. Perhaps because it is closer to the sea, he has spawned a lot of Yoni turtles. The Yoni turtles he caught later evolved into Kami turtles, and then evolved into water arrow turtles. He has collected enough lollipops. In addition, he has Ibu, Kada duck, big tongue shell, supersonic bat, BB bird, Lotta, Thorlip, Kathy, green caterpillar, unicorn bug, and so on. Of course, those weaker Pokemon are not his cup of tea. He is mainly catching these few Pokemon. The first is the water arrow turtle. The second is the supersonic bat, which he has already turned into a big mouth bat. The third is Ibu. Ibu needs 25 lollipops to evolve, but the direction of evolution is not fixed, so Zhang Hai feels uncertain. It evolves randomly. For now, what Zhang Hai wants the most is the lightning-type Pokemon. Because he does not have a lightning-type pet like Pikachu, he only caught a few small magnetic monsters. This game is really not good. BB Bird has already evolved into BB Eagle. Although its potential is not good, it is good that this kind of Pokemon is easy to catch. Currently, he is mainly cultivating these 4 types of Pokemon. As for the others, he is preparing to cultivate his main core, Mini Dragon and Charmander. However, he does not have the spawn points for these 2 types of Pokemon, which is very depressing. But although he is depressing, Zhang Hai is still very happy. Early this morning, after he had breakfast, he took the biggest power bank he bought and left. Little Huang and Xiao Bai looked at Zhang Hai and followed him. After Zhang Hai left, Qi Jie and the others also left the villa and walked around with their phones. They are not as bored as Zhang Hai, but anyway, there is nothing to do. It is always good to walk around. But just as Zhang Hai was walking around, his cell phone suddenly rang. He helplessly watched the game page disappear. Zhang Hai also sighed and glanced at the caller. It made Zhang Hai a little surprised because he did not know this number. Hello? Who is this? Although he was curious whether this is an insurance seller, Zhang Hai still picked up and asked with some doubts. Is this Zhang Hai? Hearing Zhang Hai's voice over the phone, a woman's voice with some uncertainty came from the other side of the phone. "It's me, you are." Hearing the woman's voice over the phone, Zhang Hai was a little puzzled. This voice is a bit familiar, but not too familiar. Zhang Hai carefully went through it in his mind. He really doesn't seem to know the owner of this voice. "It's me, Xia Yuan." After hearing that it was Zhang Hai, Xia Yuan hesitated for a moment and said to Zhang Hai, "Xia Yuan? Oh, hello, you haven't contacted me for so long, I thought. Hee hee. Is there something you need from me?" After hearing Xia Yuan's name, a picture flashed in Zhang Hai's mind. It was the young woman he met before entering the mountain. He called her, but she never called Zhang Hai. Zhang Hai thought that she just wanted to spend the night with him, so he didn't take the initiative to contact her. It's like this. A group of hooligans came to the shop where I work. One of them should be an Indian girl. She kept saying that she was looking for Winthrop's Zhang Hai, and those people said that they knew Zhang Hai and could take her to Zhang Hai. I was worried that this girl was talking about you, so I called to ask you. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Xia Yuan on the other side of the phone couldn't help but blush. She was naturally very clear about the story between her and Zhang Hai. In fact, these days, sometimes she also thought about Zhang Hai. However, she knew that she and Zhang Hai were not people of the same world, so it was better not to contact him. This was better for herself and Zhang Hai. However, after what happened today, she still called Zhang Hai. Indian girl? Is her name Tarak? Hearing Xia Yuan's words, Zhang Hai's first impression was of the little girl who was sleeping on the bed and looking at him when he was in the Tuajia tribe. Shouldn't she be in the mountains? Why did she appear? I don't know, but it seems that she just came out of the mountains. Those who deceived her are not good people. If you know them, then you have to think of a way. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Xia Yuan said very seriously. As mentioned before, Xia Yuan's town is also next to the Alabama mountain range. It's a lawless area, very chaotic, but the public security is good. But even if it's good, chaos means that there are many bad people. Xia Yuan is a local snake. If she said that those people are not good people, then those people are probably not good people. Zhang Hai's brain also turned for a moment. If it's really Tarak, why did she come out of the mountains? Why didn't she call him after coming out? But no matter how many doubts he has now, since he knows that an Indian girl like Tarak was deceived by a group of hooligans, Zhang Hai can't just ignore everything. Then you wait for me, I'll go there now. After speaking to Xia Yuan on the other side of the phone, Zhang Hai put away his phone and quickly ran back to the front of his villa. He just happened to see Jialina, who was practicing her kicks in the middle of the building. Jialina, come with me, bring the weapons. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Jialina was a little curious, but she still packed up and quickly returned to her room to take a shower, then put on a slim-fit clothes and left Zhang Hai's villa with 2 pistols. Zhang Hai also went upstairs to change his clothes and came down. Although he has been back for a long time, the shield has not been repaired. This time they can only drive the Tesla. When they went, he specifically called Qi Jie and told them that he had something to do, and he didn't know if he would come back at night. There is no need to worry about safety. After all, Jialina will help to look after him. After the phone call, the two also got in the car and rushed straight to the town where Xia Yuan was. At this time, in a dilapidated room in the town where Xia Yuan was located, there were 4 hooligans, gathered there to play cards, and in the distance, there was a girl whose hands and feet were tied, and her mouth was covered with a piece of tape. If Zhang Hai was here, he would definitely recognize that this girl was none other than Tarak, who he had met once before, but at this time, her face was full of panic, and a pair of big eyes were also looking at the people in front of her in horror. Looking at her appearance, the 4 men chuckled, then turned their heads and continued to play cards. I don't want to play, my luck is really bad today. Throwing the cards in his hand on the table, a white man leaned on his chair with an unhappy face, then took out a cigarette and lit it up, looking at the people in front of him with an unhappy face. Haha, your luck is really bad today. Hearing this man's words, a person next to him couldn't help but laugh. Then he grabbed the green dollars in front of him, then sorted them out one by one and put them in his pocket. Damn! You are really King lucky. By the way, boss, this girl's figure and appearance are quite good. Do you want us to try her first? Looking at the evil face of his companion, this guy couldn't help but curse. Then he looked up and saw Tarak tied there, licked his lips, and said with a smile. Try your ass. This guy is looking for Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai and Chelsea's boss Edith have a grudge. This woman is the person he wants. Besides, such a good thing you want to do it? Humph, you know, her first time or not, the price is far different. Glancing at him faintly, the man opposite him said disdainfully, Tiske, I haven't felt such a good quality woman, it's a pity not to let her come. Listening to the boss's words, the white man clicked his tongue twice, but his eyes were staring at Tarak. He won't give up so easily. It was really an accident that they met Tarak. Tarak came out of the mountain today. After she first asked for the location, she was going to go to Winthrop to find Jiang Hai, but she didn't expect that the person she asked didn't know where Winthrop was. That person was also an old Chinese man. He didn't understand English, so he didn't know what she was talking about. After hearing her words, the four guys here told her that they knew Jiang Hai and could take her to Winthrop. Then, the four of them took her to a nearby supermarket to buy some things. Xia Yuan, who has been working hard to learn English recently, accidentally heard their conversation. After remembering who the four people were, she called Jiang Hai. But unfortunately, after the four people took Tarak back to their room, they tied her up, then called Edith and told him about it. The names of Jiang Hai and Edith are actually very famous in the whole Boston area. Of course, Edith's name is much more famous than Jiang Hai's. Jiang Hai's name is nothing more than a rich man from Huaxia, who has a good relationship with the government. The only thing that is famous is his fight with the fisherman a few days ago. In their view, the one who finally admitted defeat was Jiang Hai. Otherwise, why would he pay? That's $200,000. It's enough to keep 2 fishing boats busy for a year. In their view, Jiang Hai is a person who only knows how to spend money to settle things. In fact, in the eyes of those hoodlums, they really look down on Jiang Hai. After all, Jiang Hai's deeds are not known to others. But Edith is different. This guy has been the underground emperor of the Boston area for a long time. He opened a casino and enjoyed both gray and white. If they had to choose between Jiang Hai and Edith, they would definitely choose Edith. But they are wrong about one thing. Edith doesn't dare to provoke Jiang Hai. But they don't know this. And most importantly, the call they made was not to Kristen Edith, but to his son, Izzo Edith. Izzo Edith doesn't have as good a foresight as his father. His father knows that Jiang Hai can't be provoked, but he doesn't know. He only knows that his family has fallen many times because of Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai doesn't give them any face. Even a while ago, in order to avoid Jiang Hai, they closed the casino. If the casino was closed, not only would they lose their main source of income, but most importantly, they would lose their venue. For the past few days, Izzo Edith had been very uncomfortable. He did not understand why his father was afraid of a cow seller. After receiving the phone call today, he had some ideas in his heart, but he still needed to plan how to do it. However, he told those people to keep an eye on Tarak. Since it was related to Jiang Hai, then he had to make sure that it worked well. Then he went to find a few of his friends, ready to find a way to trick Jiang Hai from this girl. Now they are thinking about whether to kidnap the girl directly, and then call Jiang Hai to come to them. Then they can blackmail Jiang Hai, or directly kill Jiang Hai to save his father and family some trouble here. Thinking of this, they feel that it is better to do it once and for all because they are not sure of money. But they don't know that while these people are planning there, Jiang Hai and Jialina have already driven to the town where Xia Yuan is. According to her, after Jiang Hai parked the car in front of the Xishang supermarket, Xia Yuan also ran out. When she saw Jiang Hai, she clearly smiled, but when she saw Jialina, her face froze for a moment. Then she nodded to Jialina unwillingly, but Jialina, who was chewing gum at this time, ignored her. She still sat there, chewing gum and listening to music. Looking at her, Xia Yuan shrugged and sat in the car. "This is your girlfriend? So fierce." Xia Yuan said in a low voice as she gently poked Jiang Hai. Kind of." Hearing Xia Yuan's words, Jiang Hai was stunned for a moment. Then he found that Jialina's body also trembled. He knew that she heard Xia Yuan's words, so he said with a smile, "If she is really Jiang Hai's girlfriend, then she will have to find trouble with Jiang Hai." But the problem was that she wasn't. She was just Jiang Hai's servant and bodyguard. Now that Jiang Hai said that she was one, it made her heart feel warm. However, she didn't show it on her face. She just sat there and chewed her gum. "What's going on?" Starting the engine, Jiang Hai asked Xia Yuan while driving in the direction she pointed. This town is actually not big. Xia Yuan is really familiar with the neighborhood. Plus there is a white girl in her supermarket who lives near these people, so she naturally knows the situation here. And just as Jiang Hai was searching for these people, Izoadis over there had also made up his mind. If he wants to do it, he will do it big. No one will go against them for a dead person. He had already inquired about it. Jiang Hai didn't have any immediate relatives. His only wife was still in the country. If something happened, he would just have to run away for a while. He believed that in the land of Boston, their family was still the overlord. He has to admit that sometimes young people do things in one word, fierce, and sometimes their thinking is too simple. What does it mean that no one will avenge Jiang Hai? Whether Jiang Hai is there or not, his manner is there, his women are there, even if it is for the sake of face, they will not go against the Adis family. Moreover, does he really think that he can beat Jiang Hai? She was really naive to the extreme. But in any case, these young people in the United States only have one word, charge. Since he made the decision, Izoadis found a few of his friends and prepared to give Jiang Hai a special meeting. After learning of Izo's decision, while Jiang Hai was looking for these people, the 4 people who kidnapped Tarak also received a call from Izo. Izo said on the phone that as long as the matter is done, these 4 people will become the managers of their family's casino. Also, each of them would be paid $50,000. These people were very excited about the money and the fact that their jobs would be solved, so they agreed on the spot. Then these people were afraid that Izoadis couldn't find the location, so the boss deliberately took 2 people to pick them up. And the guy who had evil intentions at the beginning stayed in the room to watch Tarak, in case of any accidents. After hearing that these people left, the man couldn't help but stand up from the chair with an evil smile on his face, then walked in front of Tarak, squatted down, and looked at Tarak's face. He couldn't help but laugh. Such a beautiful face, such a good figure, if I can't do it, it would be a waste. Hee, the boss said that I can't do it directly, then you have to take the initiative. If you don't want to suffer, use your little mouth to relieve me. Grabbing Tarak's hair, the white man's eyes were full of flames of desire. His nose gently sniffed Tarak's neck, and his mouth was full of obscene words. Hearing his words, Tarak immediately struggled. What a joke. She didn't want anything to happen between her and this guy. But looking at Tarak's struggle, the man became more excited. His hands forcibly fixed Tarak's head. Then he was about to kiss her. But at this moment, there was a sudden knock on the door. Hearing the knock on the door, the man couldn't help but froze for a moment, but he didn't care. He continued to prepare for violence, but the knocking didn't stop until he was a little annoyed. Then he let go of his hand. Who is it? The guy shouted at the door. It could be heard that he had a bad temper. It's me. Did anyone call for service here? Because when they came here, they already heard from Xia Yuan that these 4 guys are not good people. In order to trick the door open, Jiang Hai and Jialina deliberately made this plan. Now the one who spoke is Jialina. Xia Yuan is still in the car, and Jiang Hai won't let her take the risk. Service. Hearing the man's words, the man couldn't help murmuring out of curiosity. Could it be that his boss was afraid that I couldn't control my primitive strength when I looked at people here? Therefore, he specially called one for me before leaving? Thinking of this possibility, the man couldn't help but laugh. If someone can help him vent, he doesn't mind letting this little girl go. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but stand up and walk to the door. Looking through the peephole in the door, he saw Jialina's cold and handsome face, as well as her perfect figure. Maybe she felt his footsteps. Jialina deliberately smiled at him. Looking at the mature Jialina, the man's desire was instantly awakened by Tarak. He really hasn't seen anyone as beautiful as Jialina in this line of work. After all, he's not a habitual criminal, nor is he professionally trained. This guy doesn't know that he should be careful and vigilant at this time. He just felt that his lower part seemed to be harder, so without saying anything, he directly opened the door. But the moment the door opened, a gun was pointed at his head. Jiang Hai and Jialina slowly walked into the room. When Jiang Hai saw Tarak tied up there, his eyes narrowed. Brother, if you have something to say, we're from Edith. You know Edith, we're definitely the local tyrant here. If you offend us, you won't be able to survive in Boston. Raising his hands high, this guy calmed down in an instant. Seeing the anger in Zhang Hai's eyes, he didn't know who Zhang Hai is, and he hasn't seen Zhang Hai before. However, he knew that this person was most likely here to save the girl. It was useless to beg for mercy now, so he could only threaten. The easiest way to use the tiger's skin as a flag was to find a local bully to protect him. Edith was obviously a good choice. Oh, there's something about Edith in this? Hearing his words, Zhang Hai couldn't help but chuckle. He really didn't expect that there would be something about Kristen Edith here, ever since he was surrounded in the casino that time. Zhang Hai has already begun to prepare to deal with these three guys. Although Edith made his stance clear at the scene, Zhang Hai wasn't ready to let him go. But this guy is smart enough. After Zhang Hai left, his casino closed in the afternoon, and then he disappeared. Zhang Hai couldn't find any trouble with him, so he prepared to deal with the three guys first, then deal with him. But he didn't expect that he would be inexplicably involved today. It seems that this matter is getting more and more interesting. Bang! Thinking of this, Zhang Hai didn't say anything and directly shot the man in the leg. The .50 caliber Desert Eagle almost blew up the man's thigh. The man covered his leg and kept screaming. That scream was even louder than the sound of a pig being slaughtered, but Zhang Hai didn't care. In order not to let him continue to stimulate his eardrums, Zhang Hai went up and kicked him until he fainted, then walked towards Tarok. Chapter 773. Woo, you scared me to death. I thought I would never see you again. After Zhang Hai slowly tore off the rope and the tape on Tarok's mouth, Tarok couldn't help but hug Zhang Hai's neck and cry loudly. Hearing her words, Zhang Hai couldn't help but sigh. After all, this girl is still inexperienced. Okay, I'm here to save you, but why didn't you call me when you came out? I remember that there is a satellite phone in the tribe? Looking at Tarok in front of him, Zhang Hai patted her back gently. After the girl's mood gradually calmed down, Zhang Hai couldn't help but look at her and asked with some doubts. Yes, it's because the patriarch asked me to give this to you. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, the girl took out a letter from her back. Fortunately, she hid this letter very well and didn't take it out, so these people didn't know about it. Okay, I got it. Zhang Hai nodded after hearing her words. Since the old patriarch asked her to come, there must be some secrets in it, but Zhang Hai can't say it at this time. He just took the letter and stuffed it into his pocket. In Boston, no one dares to steal his things. Zhang Hai, a group of people is coming. Just as Zhang Hai put away the letter, his cell phone suddenly rang. When he picked it up, it was Xia Yuan's voice. Hearing her voice, Zhang Hai also gave Jia Lina a look. Jia Lina came to the window in a few steps, glanced at it, and gestured a few times to Zhang Hai. There are a total of 2 cars and 3 motorcycles. On the 3 motorcycles, they should be with this guy. There are also 2 cars. They shouldn't be the people behind these people. Hee, this time we can catch them all in one fell swoop. Squinting his eyes, Zhang Hai immediately said to Xia Yuan. Because Zhang Hai's car was originally parked some distance away from this community, Zhang Hai asked Xia Yuan to lock the car and hide well. They shouldn't notice her. Zhang Hai immediately hid Tarlac under the bed. Under Zhang Hai's signal, Jia Lina easily hid behind the refrigerator. Zhang Hai took out his Google Glass, put it on his eyes, and turned on the video. Just like that, he sat on the table and waited for the arrival of these people. His hand was still fiddling with the big eagle in his hand. After everything was ready, not long after, the 3 motorcycles and 2 cars stopped in front of the door. Looking at the door that was opened, the faces of the 3 people on the side changed at the same time. The 8 people who got out of the car after dinner also looked at each other. It was obvious that something had happened. Let's go in and see. Seeing this scene, Izoadis couldn't help but take out a Beretta 92F from his back. Looking at his action, the others also took out their guns. But after all, they are just some gangsters. The only thing they can get are pistols. 11 people, 11 guns, slowly walked into the room. The 3 people who came in first turned the corner and saw their companion lying on the ground, and Zhang Hai sitting at the table. Seeing this scene, they didn't need to say anything. They directly raised their guns to shoot, but Zhang Hai was faster. Bang, bang, bang. With 3 consecutive sounds, the arms of the 3 people holding the guns were shot in an instant. The pistols fell directly in the distance, and they squatted down while covering their hands, screaming constantly. Seeing this scene, Aizo and the others also wanted to shoot directly, but they saw that Zhang Hai had already raised his gun. Looking at Zhang Hai's understatement, Aizo waved his hand and asked everyone to stop first. Wait a minute, Zhang Hai. I am Aizo Adis, my father is Kristen Adis. I think we may have some misunderstanding. Looking at Zhang Hai's raised hand, the man swallowed a mouthful of saliva and said. He didn't think that Zhang Hai, who looked very weak, would be so ruthless. Moreover, his marksmanship was quite accurate. He watched as the three men's hands were blown up. And the most important thing is that he doesn't know the situation in this room. Is there only Zhang Hai, or they have been surrounded, so now, it's actually a good choice to admit defeat. Kristen is getting bolder and bolder. He even dared to kidnap my people. You are really arrogant. Hearing his words, Zhang Hai continued to sit there, looking at the people in front of him with an indifferent face. The pistol knocked on the table from time to time. I think you may have really misunderstood. It was these 4 guys who kidnapped that person. We just heard about it and decided to come and have a look. If I really know you, then I will send this girl back to you. We are doing this out of kindness, but I think you may be a little too sensitive. Looking at Zhang Hai, Aizo Adis said with a smile. While talking, they moved into the room, moving very slowly. After Zhang Hai heard his words, he seemed to believe them and did not react to their movement. In this way, Aizo and the 8 people slowly moved into the room, but when they saw that there was only Zhang Hai in the room, they were clearly stunned for a moment, and then these people felt their hearts begin to beat faster. Only you. Looking at Zhang Hai in front of him, Aizo Adis said with some doubts. Although the appearance of Zhang Hai completely disrupted his thoughts, according to his original idea, they came here to pick up the girl. After taking the girl and confirming her relationship with Zhang Hai, they would take her to the casino or their territory, and then force Zhang Hai to come to the appointment himself, and then find a chance to kill Zhang Hai. Of course, they basically learned this from the movies, but now that Zhang Hai appeared here, they were a little surprised. Originally, he thought that there was no chance, but who would have thought that Zhang Hai was sitting here alone? Yes, it's just me. Hearing his words, Zhang Hai said calmly. Hey, if it's only you, then you can go to hell. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Aizo had already raised his gun in an instant, aiming at Zhang Hai and was about to shoot, but Zhang Hai's speed was faster. In an instant, 4 more bullets were fired. The 4 guys standing in front of him who were holding guns were instantly shot by the bullets, and the guns flew directly to the distance. Aizo was also standing in front of them. In an instant, he felt that his hands were no longer his own. He had no way to control them at all, but the piercing pain kept coming. But after all, he was also Kristen Adis's son. In such a situation, he did not admit defeat and immediately rushed to pick up the gun that had fallen. The other 4 people who were not shot also raised their guns in their hands. But at this time, Zhang Hai was still sitting in the same place, and a figure flashed behind the refrigerator. After this person appeared, he took out 2 pistols without saying a word. These 2 pistols are Xueqi CZ75, the most classic model of Czech pistols. In fact, it is more suitable for men to use. It is powerful and handsome. It is much better than the CZ83. At the same time, the 2 guns were also pointed at other people. If other people dared to move at this time, then she didn't mind directly shooting them. Seeing these guys who were courting death were subdued in an instant, Zhang Hai also shrugged. After sitting in the same place and changing the magazine, he slowly stood up, then walked in front of these people. After kicking away all the pistols on the ground, he squatted down. Speak. Looking at Aizo Adis, Zhang Hai said very plainly. Listening to Zhang Hai's plain voice, the people here were dumbfounded, because they didn't know what to do next. Speak? Speak what? Listening to Zhang Hai's words, Aizo Adis glared at him and said with a face full of anger. Tell me how you are courting death, who told you to kidnap Tarak, and why you ambushed me. Hearing this man's words, Zhang Hai said slowly. Although he didn't know the details of this guy's plan, this guy followed these people, and when he saw that he was alone, he even took the initiative to attack, which means that he was looking for trouble. His glasses recorded everything clearly at this time. This is not a movie. What he has to do now is an interrogation. Bah, if you have the ability, kill me, you yellow monkey. Falling into Zhang Hai's hands, Adis was also a little crazy. He knew that this time he was in trouble. Big trouble. Instead of this, he might as well die. But Zhang Hai smiled, then gently stood up and glanced at Jialina. When Zhang Hai turned his head to look at the others, Jialina instantly covered Adis's mouth. Then, she exerted force on her military boots. In an instant, Adis's left index finger softly fell to the ground. His finger was directly crushed under her foot. His fingers were connected to his heart. It would be strange if Adis didn't scream, but his mouth was blocked, so he couldn't make a sound. He could only watch helplessly as Jialina broke his index finger, then moved her foot to the position of his middle finger. Then in an instant, she stomped down, and there was a sound of bones being crushed. At this time in the room, except for the still calm Zhang Hai, everyone's eyes were full of horror. They heard that Zhang Hai was a cattle breeder. How could a cattle breeder be so ruthless? But Zhang Hai didn't have the obligation to explain to them. He squatted down and looked at another person, looking at him very calmly. If he doesn't want to talk, then are you going to talk? Looking at this person, Zhang Hai said very calmly. It doesn't matter if you don't want to talk. I have 11 people here who can ask. Oh, 9 people besides you. Looking at this person, Zhang Hai said very indifferently, as if he really didn't want to know the news from this person's mouth. His indifference was somewhat excessive. I'll talk. Looking at Adis, whose third finger was broken, a trace of horror flashed in this person's eyes. Then after hesitating for a moment, he was ready to talk. After all, human life is very important in the United States. This cough, this is actually just a coincidence. The 4 guys over there kidnapped the girl who came to look for you, and then they knew that you and Mr. Adis had a grudge, so they asked Izo. Izo just said that he came over to take a look, but he didn't expect that you would arrive first. This person was still loyal, of course. He was also making fun of himself. According to them, they just came over to take a look, not to trouble Zhang Hai. Hearing his words, Zhang Hai smiled. This guy really talks big. At this time, Jialina had also dealt with Adis. Seeing Zhang Hai looking over, she walked directly to this person. Don't, I'm telling the truth, don't. Seeing the demoness Jialina appear, this person also panicked and shouted loudly, but halfway through, Jialina covered his mouth and stepped on his finger without saying a word. Looking at the person over there, screaming in horror and looking like he was in so much pain that he wanted to die, the others trembled. They felt that they were really too naive at the beginning. Kristen Adis was right not to trouble Zhang Hai. This Zhang Hai was not someone they could compare with. This guy was not only a cattle breeder, but he also had a strong martial strength. His hands were cold and his heart was black. He didn't give them a way out at all. Now there are 8 more questions to ask. Are you ready to answer? But the premise is that you don't treat me as a fool anymore. If you really encountered this matter by chance, you wouldn't have shot me directly when you saw me, right? Walking to the front of another person, Zhang Hai squatted down, his eyes exuding an evil light, but unfortunately, his glasses couldn't reach them. Okay, I'll talk. The effect of being frightened by Jialina was also infinitely magnified at this time. After hesitating for a moment, this guy was ready to talk. In fact, kidnapping Tarak was not instructed by Izo, it was done by these 4 people. But after Izo learned the news, he was ready to take the girl away and use her to threaten Zhang Hai, then kill Zhang Hai. Although the plan was very simple, the purpose was very clear, to kill Zhang Hai. I just came with him to take a look, it's not my fault. After saying that, he deliberately washed himself. But Zhang Hai didn't care about this. After laughing, he patted his face and continued to ask the people behind him. After everyone asked clearly, Zhang Hai also signaled Tarak to come out. Although Tarak is a little girl, she has seen a lot of things. With her help, she took the rope that was used to tie up these people. After tying these people up, Zhang Hai also looked for his phone and found Doyle George's phone number. This Doyle George's relationship with Zhang Hai is still very good. After all, they can be regarded as friends of life and death. When he was an intern in Winthrop, he fought side by side with Zhang Hai. Later, because of his meritorious service, he was transferred back to Boston and was directly promoted to inspector in the Boston Police Department. It is said that his family has a lot of connections, but his relationship with Zhang Hai has always been good, and they keep in touch. When Jiang Hai went to Boston a while ago, they even had a meal together. Now that such a thing has happened, he can't trust the local police. After all, this is also Chelsea's territory, and Kristen Adas has a lot of power in Chelsea. After Jiang Hai called, Doyle George heard Jiang Hai's words and immediately dispatched the police. At the same time, he notified the state. After several police cars arrived in the area, they arrested the 12 people and took them to the police station before the local police could do anything. Jiang Hai, Tarak, and Xia Yuan were also taken to the police station. Of course, after all, they were acquaintances, so they weren't handcuffed. Secondly, they weren't too serious. They just sat in the car and went over. As for Jialina, she drove back to Jiang Hai's manor. She still had to go back and report her safety. When Jiang Hai entered the police station, Moses Adams also came. As for the 12 people, they were all sent to the hospital by the police. Of course, everyone's hands were handcuffed, and there were guards standing outside. But at this time, outside a hospital in Boston, after a black Lincoln stopped, an anxious middle-aged man quickly ran into the hospital. After finding the room he was looking for, he was about to go inside. But just as he walked in, 2 policemen came in front of him and motioned him to stop. "Hi, I just want to see my son's situation. Please, I know your speaker, and I also know the people in your police station." Seeing the 2 policemen stop him, the middle-aged man immediately said anxiously. He was really anxious now. After all, his son was in the ward in front of him, and he could only stand outside helplessly. "Are you Mr. Kristen Adas?" "Sorry, the order from above. No one is allowed to enter the room." Hearing his words, the 2 policemen here couldn't help but look at each other, and then said very seriously, "How can you do this, please? You have to understand the heart of a father." Seeing that the 2 policemen were stubborn, Kristen Adas also said with a look of horror and helplessness, "This is really not possible, Mr. Adas." Hearing his words, the 2 policemen still shook their heads. This was a strict order from above. They didn't dare to let Kristen Adas go easily. This was a dead end. Izzo Adas wanted to murder Jiang Hai, even participated in the kidnapping, and took the initiative to shoot at Jiang Hai. These were all captured by Jiang Hai's Google glasses, and there was no chance to argue anything. It was not an exaggeration to say that this was irrefutable evidence. Of course, there would also be some people who would pester endlessly, but the problem was that Moses Adams was not someone to be trifled with. It was absolutely impossible for him to handle this case with irrefutable evidence. If he did, Jiang Hai would not be able to cooperate with him anymore. For lawyers, the word mistake could never exist because it was linked to money. Coupled with Jiang Hai's own strength, everyone knew that Jiang Hai would not let these people go easily. Now was the time to pick a side, so these 2 policemen would inevitably stick to their posts. "What if I let him in?" But at this moment, a slightly majestic voice came from the side of the corridor. The 2 policemen looked up and saw a majestic white man coming in from outside. "Mr. Patterson." Seeing this majestic white man, the 3 people here whispered in a low voice, especially Kristen Adas. His eyes were originally a bit gray, but at this time, they glowed with a new color. "Mr. Patterson, this case was ordered by the State Supreme Police, so we are doing our duty." "Sorry." Looking at the man in front of them, the 2 policemen hesitated, then gritted their teeth and said. Just like what they said, this man named Patterson was not an ordinary person. His full name was Javi Patroni, and he was the current leader of the Massachusetts Democratic Party. Although he was only a state senator in name, he had retired from the House of Lords. His status and ability were frighteningly powerful in Massachusetts. Everyone knew that the United States was a multi-party country, but in fact there were mainly 2 parties in charge, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. Anyone who knew the history of the United States knew very well that these 2 parties were actually split from one party. At the beginning, there was only the Democratic Party, which was established in 1791 by some planters, farmers, and some capitalists who had connections with the slave owners in the South. Later, it was renamed the Republican Party, and the Democratic Party was officially established in 1828. They became the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. The 2 parties had different policies. The Democratic Party was a left-wing liberal party. They preferred a more radical approach to governance. Most of the presidents in the United States were from the Democratic Party, such as the famous Roosevelt, Truman, Kennedy, Clinton. Even the current president, O'Hare, was from the Democratic Party. Their power was indeed greater than the Republican Party's. Of course, the Republican Party's conservative views were also the reason why they were unpopular. In Massachusetts, every party was a stronghold of the Democratic Party. This showed how much influence this middle-aged man named Harvey Patterson had here. He was actually Kristen Addis's nominal protection. Of course, he could only help him a little. After all, he was only a former member of the House of Representatives, and now he was only a state senator. In the United States, people were more particular about the cooling of the tea after the person left. He was now a person with a reputation and a tree's shadow. If you respected him, you respected him. If you didn't respect him, you didn't care. At least, he was not a match for Zhang Hai, who was now at the peak of his power. Looking at the attitude of the two policemen in front of him, it could be seen. Generally, such old people were very concerned about their reputation. The more you didn't want them to do something, the more they would do it. What's more, in his opinion, he couldn't keep Kristen Addis's child. The only thing he could do was to help Kristen Addis take care of his child. Now that he couldn't even help, it was really shameful. I guarantee on my reputation that you let him in for 10 minutes. If you don't let him in, I will go to the police station tomorrow and cause trouble for you, Patterson said fiercely as he looked at the two policemen. It seemed that they were really frightened by the old man's appearance. The two policemen couldn't help but look at each other hesitantly. Since Mr. Patterson is your guarantor, 10 minutes, don't make it difficult for us. Finally, after hesitating for a while, one of the policemen spoke first. Hearing that these policemen finally compromised, Patterson also smiled. Kristen Addis naturally thanked him, then hurriedly ran in. When he came in, Izzo Addis had already woken up. At first, he was sent to the hospital in a coma. The pain of his broken finger, coupled with the constant bleeding, made him lose consciousness. The hospital arranged an operation on the spot. They cleaned the bones in his finger, took out the bullet, bandaged the wound, and injected new blood. Although only a few hours had passed, Izzo Addis had already woken up. His whole person seemed to be a little stupid. He just stared at the ceiling blankly, without speaking or moving. If it weren't for the occasional blink of his eyes, others might think that he was dead. When Kristen Addis walked into the ward, a glimmer of light flashed in his eyes, but then it dimmed again. "Dad, I've caused you trouble." He knew that with what he had done, coupled with Zhang Hai's actions, he was doomed. Zhang Hai was not a saint. He would definitely not let him live, so he knew that he was doomed. His father couldn't save him. The only thing he felt guilty about now was that he had caused trouble for his father. He was worried that after he died, Zhang Hai would not let go of his father. Then he would be really unfilial. In fact, in terms of father-son relationship, Izzo respected Kristen very much. This was because he never talked back to his father. He would take the initiative to do what his father told him to do. If his father didn't tell him to do it, he would think for his father. These things showed that he could be regarded as a filial child. Unfortunately, he provoked someone he shouldn't have. "Silly child, what are you talking about? You'll be fine and I'll be fine. I'll find a way. What you have to do is to rest and recover, and then wait." Looking at Izzo Addis, Kristen Addis whispered. He also knew that if he went through the normal legal route, his son would be dead. Although the old man outside was his backer, with the amount of tax Zhang Hai pays every year, plus the money in Zhang Hai's pocket, the old man would not be a match for Zhang Hai. After saying this, Kristen Addis left. After watching him leave, the police on the other side didn't say anything. Patron looked at Kristen Addis's appearance. After thinking for a while, he followed him out. "Young man, this time your son was too unwise. I just got the news that Zhang Hai became a shareholder of Google a while ago, the kind that owns shares, What can I say?" Walking out of the hospital, Patron sighed and said helplessly. He came to see Kristen Addis. In fact, he had done his best. "I understand, Mr. Patron. I'm just afraid that this will involve you." Hearing Patron's words, Kristen Addis laughed a little self-deprecatingly and said to Patron, "It doesn't matter, I still have connections in Massachusetts. No matter how strong Zhang Hai is, it won't be so easy for him to deal with me." Patron shook his head and said proudly. Hearing his words, Kristen Addis just smiled. Then he got into his Lincoln and left the hospital. No one knew where he went. as the sky gradually darkened, Doyle George also walked into his office from outside. Phew, today is really tiring. Seeing Jiang Hai chatting and laughing with the two beauties, he couldn't help but shake his head helplessly. Then he hung his clothes on the hanger and walked to Jiang Hai's side. Is it done? Seeing him coming over, Jiang Hai didn't want to occupy his chair anymore. He stood up directly and walked to the open space, while Doyle George slumped directly on the chair. Well, it's done. This time they are dead, but you have to be careful. Kristen Adis is not a good person, he may do something desperate. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Doyle George also said to them seriously. Oh, I naturally know that. But this time, thank you very much. Come to my place when you have time. I have prepared a lot of beef and fish for you. Patting Doyle on the shoulder, Jiang Hai said with a smile. Oh, is this a bribe? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Doyle George said with a smile. Jiang Hai's beef and fish are very popular in Boston recently. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, he knew that the amount is indispensable. Then you can also eat at my place before you leave. Shrugging, Jiang Hai said with a smile. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Doyle George also laughed. He naturally can't leave after eating, but he is quite interested in these things. Haha, then I'll thank you in advance. Your things here are done. Do you want me to send you back? Chapter 774. It's a little late now. Do you want to stay in Boston for a night before leaving? Walking out of the police station, Jiang Hai rejected Doyle George's proposal to send them back in the police car. Moses Adams was still running around, and Jiang Hai asked Xia Yuan. Now there were 3 people here, Jiang Hai, Xia Yuan, and Tarak. Tarak would definitely follow Jiang Hai. As for Xia Yuan, Jiang Hai had to ask. After all, she still had a girl at home. It's okay. I've already asked my colleague to pick up my daughter. There shouldn't be any problems. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Xia Yuan thought for a moment. She originally wanted to refuse, but when the words came to her mouth, she changed her mind. Indeed, she was not too worried about her daughter because she used to work 2 or even 3 jobs. So at night, sometimes she would go home very late. Although she did not stay out all night, it did not matter if she stayed out all night. However, recently, because she was promoted to the supervisor of the Xishang supermarket, her salary and treatment had improved a lot. She did not have to work part-time anymore, and her life was much better. Although she did not understand why, looking at Jiang Hai's power today, she vaguely felt that it might be related to Jiang Hai. However, she did not mean to say it, and Jiang Hai did not want to say it either. Well, let's eat something first, and then find a place to rest for the night. Hearing Xia Yuan's words, Jiang Hai also smiled, then called a taxi and went to a famous 5-star hotel in Boston. The reason why Jiang Hai was familiar with this hotel was mainly because Jiang Hai himself also had a cooperative relationship with this hotel. One of the fish he sold was from this hotel. At the front desk of the hotel, Jiang Hai originally planned to book 3 rooms, 1 suite and 2 standard rooms. With his current status, staying in a hotel and not a suite was out of the question. But after hearing that there were 2 rooms in the suite, Xia Yuan did not let Jiang Hai book another room. Tarak was also very scared at this time, so it was a good choice to live with Jiang Hai. For their proposal, Jiang Hai just shrugged and agreed. In fact, when a woman was ready to live in a room with you, it was needless to say what it meant. Especially when this woman had some intimate contact with you before this. After booking a suite, Jiang Hai and the others went up to take a look. There was a master bedroom, a guest bedroom, and 2 bathrooms. Everything was good. After looking around, Jiang Hai and the others went downstairs to eat. When they arrived at the best Western restaurant, Jiang Hai, Tala, and Xia Yuan sat down and casually ordered some seafood. Jiang Hai and the others began to eat. No one came to find trouble with Jiang Hai. It seemed like the melodramatic story had unknowingly disappeared. After eating, the 3 of them were tired from the day's work, so they went upstairs to sleep. Originally, Jiang Hai stayed in the master bedroom, Xia Yuan and Tarak stayed in the small bedroom, but Jiang Hai just returned to his room to take off his clothes and take a shower. His room door was knocked. Jiang Hai opened the door and saw that it was none other than Xia Yuan. The public bathroom is occupied by Tarak. I wonder if I can use your bathroom to take a shower? Looking at Zhang Hai, Xia Yuan said with some hesitation. When she said that, her eyes kept drifting around. Looking at her appearance, Zhang Hai smiled and directly pulled her into the room. After closing the door, he pressed her against the door and kissed her. Although Xia Yuan was shocked by Zhang Hai's actions, she did not panic. After being attacked by Zhang Hai, she took the initiative to wrap her arms around Zhang Hai's waist and began to counterattack. Unknowingly, the clothes on the two of them quickly disappeared. As the two fell on the bed, Xia Yuan looked at Zhang Hai and took a deep breath. She whispered, "I just came to take a shower." "I know, but we'll take a shower together later." Looking at Xia Yuan, Zhang Hai smiled and kissed her again. At the same time, his hands were not idle. After feeling that it was about time, a low moan sounded in the room. Tarak, who had just finished showering, was drying his hair while wondering where Xia Yuan had gone. It was not until she walked to Zhang Hai's room that she heard some noise. Her small face could not help but blush. Although she did not experience this, she was not a girl who did not know anything. She knew what Zhang Hai and Xia Yuan were doing inside, so after spitting, she walked back to her room to rest. Recently, she did not have a good night's sleep. Today, she encountered such a situation. Not long after lying in bed, she fell asleep. On the other side, Zhang Hai and Xia Yuan's battle had reached its climax. Zhang Hai really did not expect this. This Xia Yuan was really amazing in this aspect. Perhaps it was because she had been empty for too long, but she could actually withstand Zhang Hai's attacks and was even constantly counterattacking. The two of them fought from the bed to the ground, then to the window, then to the sofa in the room, and then to the corner of the room. After fighting for more than 2 hours, Xia Yuan let out a sigh of relief. She was satisfied with her defeat. Like an octopus, she firmly hugged Zhang Hai's body. Zhang Hai also let out a long breath. He was actually a little tired. Feeling the sweat on the two of them, Zhang Hai carried her into the bathroom. Zhang Hai, who had already prepared a vat of hot water, slowly sat down with Xia Yuan in his arms. The warm water spread over the two of them, and their fatigue gradually disappeared. Too comfortable. Perhaps the hot water gave Xia Yuan a little strength. She hugged Zhang Hai and whispered in Zhang Hai's ear. Hearing her words, Zhang Hai was satisfied, but he did not know what to say. "If you have time in the future, remember to come and play with me. I'm a little addicted." Seeing that Zhang Hai did not speak, Xia Yuan also smiled. She did not intend to marry Zhang Hai. She did not even want to confirm their relationship, but she was very obsessed with Zhang Hai's body. Hearing that Zhang Hai did not speak, she naturally knew what Zhang Hai meant. It was obviously a good choice to make it clear at this time. Hearing her words, Zhang Hai also nodded and said seriously, "Well, of course that's not a problem." Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Xia Yuan could not help but smile. Then she continued to hug Zhang Hai, immersing herself in the impact just now. After taking a bath for half an hour, Zhang Hai carried Xia Yuan back to bed and fell asleep with her in his arms. It was a quiet night. In fact, it wasn't really a quiet night. At about 3 o'clock in the middle of the night, a group of people walked into the hospital where Xueqi was. Half an hour later, they pushed Xueqi out of the hospital. After getting into a black Ford MVP, they disappeared into the night. Less than 10 minutes later, the hospital's alarm rang loudly. Then Doyle George, who had just rested, immediately rushed to the hospital overnight with his men. When he saw the 2 state policemen who had been silently killed in the empty room, his face was as ugly as it could be. He immediately applied for a transfer order and then went to arrest Kristen Adis. However, when they arrived at Kristen Adis's house, they found that he had already left in the afternoon. No one knew where he went, and his casino was empty. Even his relatives did not know where he had gone. Connecting the dots, it was not difficult for Doyle George to guess that these guys should have run away. Bastard! Xueqi was the main culprit this time. He originally promised Zhang Hai that there would be no problems. But in the end, before the night was over, the problem occurred. Thinking of this, he could not help but look a little ferocious. He immediately issued an arrest warrant, but just as the warrant was about to be signed, it was stopped by someone. "Hello." Hearing the phone ring, Zhang Hai also opened his eyes in a daze. He glanced at the time on the phone. It was only 5 o'clock, but it was Doyle George calling, so Zhang Hai picked it up. Jiang, there's a problem. Adis ran away. Hearing Jiang Hai's voice, Doyle George's tone on the phone was a little serious and helpless. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai's sleepiness was driven away a lot. Ran away? How did he run away with that kind of injury? Hearing his words, Jiang Hai was very sure that Adis's hands were crippled. He could have run away with his feet, but how did he run away? Did he just stroll out like that? It should be his father, Kristen Adis. Damn it, I was going to issue an arrest warrant, but I was stopped by a veteran senator in the state. He said that this matter was still under investigation, and we shouldn't make too much of a fuss. We lost 2 agents, this fucking politician. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Doyle George couldn't help but curse. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai was silent. He was not worried that this guy would harm him after he ran away. He was still very satisfied with the protective force around him, but it was not Jiang Hai's style to let the other party run away like that. After hearing his words, Jiang Hai understood what Doyle George meant. He was a person in the system, so maybe he couldn't intervene in this matter. After all, the higher-ups had given orders, and he couldn't disobey. But in fact, Jiang Hai was quite satisfied with this situation. This was because if there was any enmity, he would take revenge himself. This time, he was not very happy with the help of the police, but this time, Jiang Hai was really happy to let him run away. If he ran away, Jiang Hai would have a chance to kill these guys with his own hands. I'm leaving. Remember to visit me if you have time. The next morning, after breakfast, Xia Yuan smiled at Jiang Hai again. After the two hugged, they got into a taxi and prepared to return to her home. She still had work to do today. Jiang Hai also smiled and waved his hand. After sending her to the car, he returned to his room. When he came back, Tarak woke up in a daze. Looking at her, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. You're up. Looking at Tarak, Jiang Hai said to her. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Tarak also nodded obediently. She knew that this was Jiang Hai's territory, so it was better for her to pretend to be obedient. You were scared yesterday, right? You're too much. Your patriarch is old and confused, and you are also confused. Don't you know to call me when you come out? If you can't, I'll pick you up. Looking at her appearance, Jiang Hai also brought up the breakfast he prepared in advance. Of course, it was ordered from the hotel. A bowl of oatmeal and a hamburger. No, that satellite phone, according to the patriarch, must be bugged. If I call you first, it may be bugged. The only people who can speak English are me and him. He has to stay in the village, so I can only come to find you. Seeing Jiang Hai bring up the food, Tarak's eyes also lit up. Without saying a word, she directly picked up the hamburger and stuffed it into her mouth. Then she ate the hamburger and drank the porridge while speaking vaguely. Slow down, no one is fighting with you. Why are you in such a hurry? What's the big deal about eavesdropping? Looking at her appearance, Jiang Hai rolled his eyes at her. He had to admit that sometimes these old people are paranoid. Take Jiang Hai for example. He never cared about these things. The US government knows where he goes. Jiang Hai didn't care. This is not freedom, this is not democracy. In Jiang Hai's opinion, this is the safest way. For example, in China, no one would say no to the installation of the Sky Eye. What democracy and freedom? They think too much. There is no absolute freedom in this world. Everyone lives in a framework. At least that's what Jiang Hai thought. Therefore, he didn't care if he was being monitored or if he was truly free. No, this time I'm bringing you something very important. No one can know about it. However, after hearing Jiang Hai's words, Tarak said with a serious face. That expression that says no one can know about it made Jiang Hai a little confused. Is it this thing? Looking at her appearance, Jiang Hai took out the letter from his pocket and asked her with some doubts. Seeing her nodding seriously, Jiang Hai couldn't help but open the letter in confusion. He wanted to see what is inside that can't be seen by outsiders. After opening the envelope, Jiang Hai found two things inside. One is a piece of paper. The other is a piece of animal skin. Jiang Hai looked at the paper first. What was written on it was a letter. The letter should be from the patriarch. It said that this time the tribe survived thanks to Jiang Hai. But now he wants to trouble Jiang Hai with one thing. He is going to let Tarak go to the outside world. Among the people he knows in the outside world, the most reliable person is Jiang Hai. So he asked Jiang Hai to help take care of her and let her go to school. In order to thank Jiang Hai for his help in taking care of Turok, he gave Jiang Hai the treasure of their tribe, a treasure map. Treasure map. Seeing this, Jiang Hai couldn't help but look at the animal skin. He only saw a lot of things scribbled on it. There is a red X mark in the middle. It is similar to the treasure map he saw before. Jiang Hai was a bit confused. Could it be that there really was a treasure? This treasure is real. If you know some of the history of the United States, then you should know its existence. Seeing Jiang Hai's puzzled look, Turok couldn't help but speed up her eating. After eating the hamburger and porridge, she looked at Jiang Hai seriously and said. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai was a little surprised. Does she know about this? When I came out, the patriarch was actually going to pass the position of the patriarch to me when he was old. This is also something that our tribe has been guarding for generations. You should know that the western part of the United States was built by ourselves. Looking at Jiang Hai's puzzled look, Turok said seriously. Hearing Turok's words, Jiang Hai thought for a moment. How was it built? The continent is drifting? Well, Jiang Hai knows that she is definitely not talking about this, so after thinking for a while, he shook his head affirmatively. Say. In the beginning, there were no people on the west coast of the United States. After all, most people came from Europe. They came from the east coast. The east side of the United States was Australia and Huaxia. At that time, no one in Australia had the ability to sail, and although Huaxia had the ability, your country's political policy was not to go to sea, so the west coast was empty at first. In order to develop the west coast, in the 18th and 19th centuries, the United States authorities promoted the westward movement and launched a gold rush. Seeing that Jiang Hai really didn't know, Turok shook her head and said with a serious face. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai nodded. He still knows a little about the development of the West and the gold rush. The Chinese workers at the beginning were basically attracted by the gold rush and the construction of railroads. Many people died in the West. It can be said that the west of the United States was built on the bones of Chinese workers. There were also many survivors. If one were to talk about Chinese settlements in the United States, San Francisco would be the top choice. Even Los Angeles and New York are far worse than San Francisco. It is not an exaggeration to say that San Francisco is a Chinese city, even if it is still standing on the map of the United States. It's good to know this. In the beginning, our ancestors were also part of the West, but unlike those white people, we were slaves and were sent to develop gold mines. However, our ancestors were not satisfied, so they revolted and killed the evil slave owners. After that, they fled back to the Alabama mountains, but they left this map. According to our ancestors, the things depicted on this map are the location of the gold mine where they were enslaved. When they left, they blew up the gold mine, but in the secret chamber below the gold mine, there is still a lot of gold. Looking at Jiang Hai, Turok said seriously. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai's eyebrows couldn't help but raise. This story is a bit interesting. Of course, what Turok said must be to beautify his ancestors. In Jiang Hai's view, the most likely explanation is that those Native Americans were originally slaves, but when they saw the gold, they had evil thoughts, so they killed the supervisor and the boss. But with so much gold, they probably couldn't take it away, so they deliberately dug a basement, hid the gold, and then blew up the mine, waiting for time to come back and take it out. However, they did not expect that they might have stirred up a hornet's nest. They were chased from the west coast to the east coast, all the way until they hid in the Alabama mountain range. However, these people were scared out of their wits and did not come out for the rest of their lives. Later, they made up a story and left behind a map. But no matter what the reason is, Jiang Hai is most concerned about the thing inside, which is gold. Moreover, there was more than 1 million gold buried in the ground. Whether it was sold at the price of gold or at the price of antiques, it was estimated that it would be a great fortune. In his opinion, Du Feynman should be very interested in it. Last time when those people attacked the tribe, it was also because of this thing. Suddenly, Jiang Hai understood what the patriarch was afraid of. If the outside world knew that they have such a treasure map, whether it is the American government or those rich people, they will not let them go. Instead of hiding it, it is better to use it to get on good terms with Jiang Hai. Although the time they spent together was not long, he can see that Jiang Hai is a very particular person. If Jiang Hai gets these treasures, Although it is impossible for him to give them all, the benefits of their tribe will not be small. And even if Zhang Hai forgot, he specially sent Turok to Zhang Hai's side. If Turok and Zhang Hai have any special relationship in the future, then with Zhang Hai's way of doing things, he will not treat her lightly. Turok also said that she will learn according to the treatment of the future patriarch, which means that she will return to the tribe in the future. If Zhang Hai does not want Turok to return to the tribe, then it is inevitable that he will take the entire Toga tribe out. Even if he follows Turok's idea and lets her go back, with Zhang Hai's way of doing things, he will definitely not treat his woman badly. At that time, the Turok tribe will be truly glorious, and it will be more useful than holding a treasure map. He has to admit that the patriarch made the right bet. Zhang Hai is indeed not a ruthless person. Not to mention that he and Turok do not have that kind of relationship, just based on the treasure map that they gave him. If the treasure is real, he will definitely not let the Toga tribe be like it is now. As expected of an old man who doesn't die to be a thief. This old man is really good at reading people. Holding this treasure map, Zhang Hai admitted that he is very interested. Now, let's see if this thing is real. I'm full. What are we going to do now? Go back to your house? While Zhang Hai was meditating, Turok had also finished eating. He put the bowl on the table and blinked his big eyes at Zhang Hai. Chapter 775. No, since we're here, let's walk around here first. Since you want to live with us, you must buy some clothes and so on. Since we're here, let's just take a look. By the way, I have to go to my company. Hearing her words, Zhang Hai thought for a moment and said to her, since they are here, he is going to walk around Boston. Besides, he has other things to do. First, he has to send someone to see if the gold mine is still there. Second, he has to find Izzo Adis. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Turok naturally had no objection. In fact, she felt that her clothes were quite good. It was pure animal skin. It was breathable and comfortable to wear. But the patriarch said that after coming here, she had to listen to Zhang Hai's arrangements, so she would not resist. Let's go. Seeing that she did not object, Zhang Hai also stood up, washed his face, and then looked again. After making sure that he did not leave anything behind, he went to the first floor to check out. Then the two took a taxi to Newberry Street. Newberry Street was also a shopping mecca in Boston, similar to the shopping streets in every city. Newberry Street was very eye-catching in Boston, and even in the United States. It was also known as Boston's Rodeo Avenue. It was called a street, but it was actually a block because it covered a total of 8 blocks. There were hundreds of popular shops, gourmet restaurants, and many beauty salons. The shops on both sides of the street were the most popular red brick buildings in the 19th century. They looked very elegant. Even the unique half-basement shops of that era were open for business. If you didn't look carefully, you would think you were in Europe. Of course, for Zhang Hai, he couldn't see the difference between the United States and Europe. Bitches twisted love. But there was also a point to pay attention to when shopping here. The level of the shops in the East was aristocratic, and the further west it was, the more commoner. So if you want to buy something, if it was some luxury goods, go to the East. If it was some ordinary brands, go to the West. Turok herself didn't know much about money. Zhang Hai didn't care about money, so he went directly to the East and let Turok look around. She liked Dior, so Zhang Hai and the others went in to buy it. Soon, when Turok came out again, the animal skin and hiking shoes on her body changed into a set of Dior women's summer clothes this year. However, it wasn't the kind of summer dress that one would wear in high heels. Turok had never worn high heels in his life, so it was better not to force her. She was dressed very young and beautiful, but she was wearing a pair of flat shoes. She specifically asked the shop assistant to buy them from Converse. After changing into the new clothes, Zhang Hai also bought her a few more sets of clothes. She walked out with Zhang Hai with a big smile on her face. She was a little hungry, so she decided to have lunch nearby. After lunch, Zhang Hai took her to the Tunglong Company's location in Boston. After arriving downstairs, he took Turok directly to the Tunglong Company's floor. As soon as they walked down, a girl at the front desk stood up respectfully and nodded gently without looking at them. Welcome to the Tunglong Company. How can I help you? Hearing this person's voice, Zhang Hai was stunned for a moment. Then after the person raised her head, he was stunned. The girl opposite him was also stunned, because Zhang Hai knew this girl, and the girl also knew Zhang Hai. "You are Kelly's classmate, you are." Looking at the girl, Zhang Hai asked with some doubts. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, the girl smiled and then said confidently to Zhang Hai, "Well, it's me, my name is Jenny Pond." "You have changed a lot. But why are you at the front desk? I think it's not too much to give a talent like you a project manager." Looking at Jenny Pond in front of him, Zhang Hai asked with some doubts. In his impression, Jenny Pond was not bad looking, but the way she dressed should be completely different. She had very long straight hair, covered her face, lowered her head when she walked, and wore a pair of very old-fashioned glasses. Although she was very clean, she gave people a feeling of dispiritedness and shabbiness. But at this time, Jenny Pond was completely different. She had refreshing straight hair, but there were some curls in the hair. Her face was painted with lighter makeup that was different from the mainstream in the United States. She was wearing an office lady's suit, which made people's eyes light up. If it weren't for Zhang Hai's good memory, there would be very few people who would recognize this girl and the girl from before. But what made Zhang Hai even more surprised was that he remembered that this girl was quite capable. Why was she at the front desk? Was Zhang Jin purposely giving the cold shoulder to the person he had recommended? If that was the case, then there was a problem. "Hee, Director Zhang also joined in the same way, but you also know that my personality is very bad. If I continue to be like this, it will be difficult for me to gain a foothold in this world. So Director Zhang specially transferred me to the front desk for 3 months, so that I can change my previous temper." Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Jenny Pond smiled. She was actually very satisfied with Zhang Jin's arrangement. These days at the front desk, she had learned a lot: how to unite colleagues, how to receive guests, and how to speak to whoever she met. Of course, she also saw the mess in society, but she was called by Zhang Hai, and she was protected by Zhang Jin. Even if she was good-looking, no one dared to provoke her. Otherwise, Zhang Jin was not to be trifled with. "Are you here to find Director Zhang this time?" Hearing her words, Zhang Hai also nodded with satisfaction. It was good that she was not deliberately targeting him. Seeing Zhang Hai's relieved expression, Jenny Pond also smiled, and then asked Zhang Hai with some doubts. "No, I'm here to look for Valentina and Arlsala." Hearing her words, Zhang Hai shook his head naturally, and then said to her. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Jenny Pond immediately responded, and led him to Zhang Hai's chairman's office, and then went to find Valentina and Aleppo. Speaking of these two women, no, not only the two of them but also Belyak Trotsky and Rayla Scarter, these 4 women were now quite famous in the company. Rayla Scarter, the Samoan girl, was now the security captain of the Soaring Dragon Group in this office building. In the beginning, those security guards still had some contempt for such a delicate and short girl. However, after Rayla Scarter beat them up so badly that they didn't dare to get up again within a minute, no one dared to say anything. Belyak Trotsky was Zhang Jin's bodyguard. On the surface, he was an assistant, but in fact, he was a bodyguard who followed her in and out. Valentina Baralikia and Alessera were the leaders of the 2 special foreign trade groups. They didn't need to talk about work, they were more there to hold down the fort. Originally, because the Tenglong Company was a newly established company. Including the logistics and the airport, they were very disdainful of the Tenglong Company, and sometimes they would deliberately hold back the goods. Of course, they didn't dare to exceed the time limit, because they knew that the chief lawyer of the Tenglong Company was Moses Adams. If they dared to hold back the goods, they would be sued until they went bankrupt. But even if they didn't hold back the goods, they would try to hold back as much as possible. For example, the new fish and shrimp that arrived today, the departure time was between 7 a.m. and 10 a.m. Originally, the goods could be delivered at 8 a.m., but these people held back until 9:50 a.m., which was annoying. But after these 2 came, it was said that in less than 3 days, these guys were well behaved. The goods of the Soaring Dragon Group were always the first to be delivered. They would be delivered when the time arrived. They were much more famous than Zhang Hai. After Jenny Pond passed the message, Valentina and Aleppo came in less than 5 minutes. As soon as they came to Zhang Hai's office, they rushed to Zhang Hai's side with a smile and sat on the armrests of Zhang Hai's chair, one on the left and one on the right. "You came to see us. Didn't we just meet last Sunday?" Looking at Zhang Hai, the 2 women were quite enthusiastic. To be honest, now they really had Zhang Hai's shadow in their hearts. Zhang Hai was not only their buyer, but also their master. Moreover, he allowed them to walk under the sun. Most importantly, he had a certain amount of power. Just thinking about it made them feel good. In the past, no matter how outstanding they were, they still had to be careful when facing some of the elites of society, high officials and so on, because they were the potential customers of their organization. But with Zhang Hai, they didn't need to be careful. Although they didn't go to the extent of being the boss, they also didn't need to act like a grandson whenever they met anyone. Zhang Hai really did what he had promised them. He allowed them to live under the sun as if they were one person. Therefore, in fact, although Galena and the others were usually cold, they were still very lively with Zhang Hai. Zhang Hai's Soaring Dragon group had 2 days off every week. Basically, every Friday, these girls would go back to Zhang Hai's manor. The only one who couldn't go back was Du Ning, because she had to protect Qili. As for Biliak, she could also go back every half a month, because Rayla Carter would replace her for a week. They had just met a few days ago, but now that they saw Zhang Hai, they were still very excited and happy. I came here this time first to see you, and second, because there are 2 things I need you to investigate. Hugging the 2 girls' waists, Zhang Hai smiled. He could feel their attachment to him, which was a very good thing, but he still had to talk about business. Chapter 776. Today, there are 2 things I need you to do. One is to help me find a group of people, Izo Adis and Kristen Adis. These 2 guys ambushed me, and after they were dealt with, they were rescued by others. But I don't think they have left the United States yet, so I will leave this matter to you. After Jalina left, she had already told these people about what happened yesterday. The purpose was to strengthen the security of the defense. However, they did not know that Izo Adis had been rescued by someone else this morning. This was a very important matter. After offending Zhang Hai, they still want to live normally? They are really too naive. Even if they chase them to the ends of the earth, they will still deal with these guys because they are also a potential threat. After hearing Zhang Hai's words, the eyes of the 2 women became fierce. Although they were still smiling, even Tarak felt a faint killing intent. It seems that these 2 women are not easy to provoke. Second, help me check this place. After Zhang Hai finished speaking, he took out the map he got from Tarak. After taking a look at the map, Sarah immediately took out a piece of paper. She didn't want to draw the map. If she wanted to draw it, she could just copy it or take a picture with her mobile phone. How simple would that be? What she was doing now was to use a code that only they could understand to record the map. Zhang Hai glanced at the map and saw that it was really messy. There were English words, numbers, and some words that were obviously in Arabic or Hebrew. It was very difficult to record. Anyway, Zhang Hai gave up after a glance. Wanting to understand this piece of paper was not an easy thing to do. About 10 minutes later, Sarah also finished recording, and then put this piece of paper in the inner pocket of her clothes. Seeing that they were all done, Zhang Hai also smiled and put away the original animal skin. Originally, since Zhang Hai came, he wanted to go out with Sarah and Valentina in the afternoon to play. But after the 2 got the task, they left first. For them, it was a very happy thing to have a task to do, so Zhang Hai didn't stop them. Then, he went to see Release Card Store and Biliak, who had to protect Zhang Jin. After that, Zhang Hai was ready to go back. Of course, when he saw Biliak, Zhang Hai also saw Zhang Jin. But Zhang Jin didn't have a good impression of Zhang Hai, especially when she saw a girl beside him. Speaking of which, Zhang Jin was still quite loyal to Qi Jia. Zhang Hai had a lot of girls on his side, so she naturally felt uncomfortable. So after saying goodbye to Zhang Hai, she went to do her own things. Although she didn't like Zhang Hai, she was still very concerned about the company's affairs. After saying goodbye to Biliak and the Violator, Release, Zhang Hai also left. When he left, he naturally bumped into Jenny Pound. According to her, she wanted to treat Zhang Hai to a meal to express her gratitude. This was also what she heard from the people in the company. This was a way for people in China to express their gratitude. But Zhang Hai didn't lack that meal. After telling her to work hard and thank him, Zhang Hai also left. He went downstairs directly, found a taxi, and prepared to go directly back to Winthrop. While Zhang Hai was taking the taxi to Winthrop, a group of people were slowly moving in the direction of New York. There were a total of 8 people in this group. 6 of them were strong men, and 2 of them, one was in a wheelchair, and the other looked haggard. This group of people was none other than Kristen Adis and the others. Seeing his son's miserable appearance yesterday, Kristen Adis was really angry. He really wanted to fight Zhang Hai, but considering that he probably couldn't win against Zhang Hai, he had to swallow his anger. There was only hope when people were alive. He only had one son, Izzo Adis. He must protect the bloodline of his family. Therefore, he used all his ability and connections to find these 6 most loyal subordinates of his in the past. He took over the hospital and saved his son. However, after saving his son, it was only the beginning because they still had to escape. They didn't dare to drive or walk near the road. Because if they killed a police officer, even if the police didn't issue a national arrest warrant, the police in Massachusetts would definitely not let them go. So they could only walk on some small roads and move toward New York. Before leaving, Kristen Adis had already prepared. They were going to New York, where he knew someone in the underworld. Using that person's ability, they would first make a few fake identities, then use these identities to go to New Jersey, where they would take a plane to Panama. He just didn't know if his plan would be completed. Not far away on the highway from time to time, there were sounds of police cars whistling by. They had not rested at all since 3 o'clock in the morning, nor had they eaten anything. They were almost out of water. Although everyone felt very tired and hungry, they knew very well that now was not the time to rest. At the very least, they had to leave Massachusetts before they could rest. Therefore, they had been hurrying along. But they didn't notice that a motorcycle, unknowingly, had left Boston and was slowly chasing them in the direction they escaped. But according to the speed of the motorcycle, it would take a while for it to catch up. At this time, Zhang Hai and Tarak had returned to their home in Winthrop. After paying the taxi, Zhang Hai walked back to the villa with Tarak. It was the first time he came to Zhang Hai's home, so Tarak was a little nervous and scared. When he walked, he was very careful, as if he was afraid of any noise, but this was just deceiving himself. Before he walked to the front of the villa, 2 dogs suddenly barked in front of him, and then 2 big dogs quickly ran out of the villa and rushed to Zhang Hai, wagging their tails vigorously. Hey! These dogs are so big! Looking at the 2 big dogs, Tarak was not afraid, but he was very excited, and he couldn't help but say. The Toga tribe also raised dogs, and they had a lot of dogs. But these dogs were basically some native dogs, and their bloodlines were very messy. They were not big, and they were not fierce, but they were very strong because these dogs had to cooperate with the people in the tribe to hunt. In Tarak's opinion, if Little Huang and Xiao Bai were used to hunt, they would be very good dogs. This size looked very intimidating. Yeah, they only know how to eat. Come, let me introduce you. This is Little Huang, this is Xiao Bai, and this is Tarak. They will be living here in the future, so let's get to know each other. Hearing Tarak's words, Zhang Hai also smiled and patted the heads of the 2 dogs, and said to them. Although Little Huang and Xiao Bai can't speak, it may be because they absorbed a lot of aura. The IQ of these 2 guys is actually very high, almost the IQ of a 6 or 7-year-old child. According to the domestic standard, this is already the level of a first grader, so they can understand the words of people very well. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, they took the initiative to go over and sniff Taraga's scent. Then Xiao Bai grinned and wagged its tail. It is a Caucasian dog, and Little Huang, the green wolf mastiff, just turned around indifferently and squatted down. This is considered to be getting to know Taraga. Good dog, good dog. Looking at Xiao Bai's friendly action, Taraga was also very happy. She rubbed Xiao Bai's head hard and said with a smile. Looking at her appearance, Zhang Hai was relieved. It seems that her life here will not be too boring. Even if she can't play with the women at home, she has her own playmates. After watching her play with Xiao Bai for a while, Zhang Hai also took her to the villa. Walking into the villa, Qi Jie and the others were all there. Yesterday, Zhang Hai called and explained that Taraga would come. When Jia Lina came back, she also roughly told them what Zhang Hai did. Of course, in front of them, she couldn't tell them that Zhang Hai went to shoot. She said that Taraga went out of the forest, then called Zhang Hai and asked Zhang Hai to pick her up. Of course, there were many loopholes, but Qi Jie and the others also understood that if she didn't tell them, they wouldn't be able to get anything out of it. However, for Zhang Hai to bring another girl home, these girls were a little uncomfortable in their hearts. So after Zhang Hai entered the door, they were still very warm to Taraga, but their faces were a little cold to Zhang Hai. Facing their attitude, Zhang Hai just smiled and said nothing. Then everyone took Taraga to the second floor and tidied up her room. Then Delina and Marian, who were about the same age as her, took her around. They didn't have that kind of relationship with Zhang Hai. Now that they had a new playmate, it was a good thing for them. Seeing that these girls could play together, Zhang Hai was also very happy. The most important thing in a family was harmony. Whether these things were acting in front of him or not, at least Zhang Hai himself liked this feeling. Sitting on his big sofa, Zhang Hai's eyes narrowed. In fact, he had always been a lazy person. If life could go on like this, it would be a good choice. As the sky gradually darkened, a heavy rain slowly floated down. However, at this time, there was a group of people whose mood was completely opposite to Zhang Hai's. As the sky gradually darkened, a glimmer of hope appeared in these people's eyes. But suddenly, the sound of a motorcycle came, making these people's faces instantly become ugly. Chapter 777. Be careful. Hearing the sound of the motorcycle approaching, Kristen Adis couldn't help but say to the people around him. At the same time, he glanced around. At this time, they were about to leave the territory of Massachusetts. At this time, there was a river and a highway in front of them. As long as they cross this river or the highway, they will enter the territory of New York. When they get there, they can relax a little. At least, the Massachusetts police will not easily trouble them. But this is also the most dangerous time. Hearing his words, the faces of the people around him changed. Then they nodded seriously and took out their guns from behind. Their eyes were also scanning around, ready to see where the enemy was. At this time, the dark clouds that had been accumulating in the sky seemed to be about to erupt. Bean-sized raindrops fell from the sky, constantly drenching these people and the surrounding land. At this moment, the sound of the motorcycle suddenly grew louder. Then, a figure flashed in the dark night. The figure was so fast that it didn't even give these people any chance to react. They only saw the person on the figure take out 2 pistols in an instant. Bang! 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 2 of these people had already fallen in a pool of blood, and these people immediately opened fire at this time, but the speed of the motorcycle was much faster than they imagined. After landing, it disappeared into the distance in an instant. These people's bullets all hit the ground. Seeing this scene, Kristen Adis's eyes couldn't help but dim. He knew that this person was definitely not from the police, so it could only be Zhang Hai's people. If they don't kill this person, then they will have to die. Form a circle. This guy is not from the police. It's useless even if we cross the river. Kristen Adis was still very clear that Zhang Hai's people won't care. The place where they killed him was in Massachusetts or New York. There should be some trouble, but if these fugitives died, even if they knew that Zhang Hai did it, no one would seek justice for them. What's more, they couldn't represent justice themselves. In such a case, they could only fight with their backs against the wall. Hearing his words, the remaining 4 people instantly surrounded them and looked around vigilantly. But at this moment, the sound of a motorcycle could be heard again, and the motorcycle came out again. However, the speed of the car was too fast. The man held a gun in one hand and fired 3 or 4 shots in an instant. This time it was even worse. 3 of the 4 people on the opposite side fell down. The remaining one fired his pistol wildly, but unfortunately, the pistol had a limit of bullets. With 2 clicking sounds, the empty sound of the firing pin told him that there were no more bullets. At this moment, the motorcycle that was about to escape suddenly skidded to a stop. Under their gaze, a woman in a black leather jacket stood on the spot, looked at them, and took off her helmet. In an instant, under the afterglow of the sun, a pretty face appeared in the eyes of the 3 men. Seeing this pretty face, the 3 men were stunned for a moment. They found it hard to imagine how such a pretty woman could be so ferocious. She killed 5 of their brothers without blinking, but fortunately, their reaction was very fast. The man who was still alive picked up his companion's pistol and was about to attack, but at this time, the woman also made her move. She raised her gun and shot the man between his eyebrows. If someone saw at this time, they would find that the woman had shot the man between his eyebrows. This was also the reason why she was not worried that these people would get up again. 6 people, each with a bloody hole in their heads, were naturally dead. Among the people who were still standing, only this woman, Kristen Adis, and Izzo Adis, who was sitting in a wheelchair and had been scared out of his wits. This woman's skills had really left a deep impression on him. He had never thought that a person could take care of those seemingly well-made people so easily. It seems that I can't escape this time. Looking at the woman who stopped the motorcycle and walked closer and closer, Kristen Adis smiled bitterly and hugged his son's head. The father and son touched each other's heads, and Kristen looked at Izzo. The rain in the sky did not dim the light in the father's eyes. Remember, as long as there are leaves flying, the fire will burn. The shadow of the fire shines on hope, and new leaves will sprout. I'm sorry, I can't watch my only son get married and have children, but you must live. Remember, you must live. Kristen Adis looked at his son and said with a smile. His big hand also stroked Izzo Adis's face. Now that they had come this far, was there any need to talk about hatred? It should be, but if he had the chance to do it again, he would still do it. If he could go back in time, then he would have stayed far away from Zhang. A father is willing to do anything for his child, even if it means sacrificing his own life. Dad, you. Hearing his father's words, Izzo was a little scared at this time. He had a feeling in his heart that he seemed to know what his father was going to do. Looking at Izzo's appearance, Kristen Adis chuckled, then in an instant, he pushed his son's wheelchair into the distant river. He shouted and directly bumped into the woman who was coming over. Seeing his movements, the woman did not immediately react. She raised her hand and fired several shots, but she didn't know if this guy was really lucky or the rain hindered her performance. The bullets flew past Izzo's body, and the only one that hit him was his leg. Just as she was about to aim and shoot again, Kristen Adis rushed over and pounced on her without saying a word. Seeing this, the woman's eyes narrowed and she instantly withdrew her gun. At the same time, she pulled out a finger blade from her boot. She didn't give Kristen Adis any chance at all. The finger blade instantly pierced into the back of his head, and his body stiffened. As the finger blade was pulled out, Kristen Adis fell to the ground powerlessly. When the woman was about to chase Izzo Adis, she found that Izzo Adis had fallen into the river. She immediately rushed to the river, but only saw his wheelchair. As for Izzo Adis, he had disappeared. Seeing this, her eyes narrowed and she couldn't help but curse herself. What the hell is going on? She immediately walked a few steps to the river, but only saw his wheelchair. As for Izzo Adis, he had disappeared. Seeing this, her eyes narrowed and she couldn't help but curse herself. Hello, Zhang, the mission failed. Izzo Adis escaped. Then she helplessly pressed her Bluetooth headset. On the other side, Zhang cell phone in Winthrop also rang at this time. Picking up the phone, the woman on the other side, to be exact, Valentina said with some depression. This is the first time she has performed such a mission in Zhang. What about the others? Hearing Valentina's words, Zhang couldn't help but ask with some doubts. The others have been dealt with. Hearing Zhang words, Valentina said immediately. Oh, it's okay. The most important thing is that you are not injured. That guy, if there is a chance in the future, I will deal with him. After you deal with him, you can go back. It's already very late. Hearing Valentina's words, Zhang said in a flat tone. The heavy rain will cover all traces. They are the most professional, so they know how to take advantage of this. Not long after she disappeared, in the turbulent river, an unconscious figure appeared on the surface of the river. Following the current, he rushed forward. After an unknown amount of time, he stopped on a shoal. His condition didn't look too good. At this moment, a small group of figures that looked rather pathetic walked out of the forest in the distance. These people were fully armed, and the person in the lead had a large patch on his face, as if he had encountered a fire. Beside him was a person wearing mountaineering clothes. The heavy rain continued to fall. With the sound of a horn, the shutter door outside the garage of a small villa in downtown Boston slowly opened, and then Valentina and her motorcycle slowly drove into the garage. At this time, in addition to this motorcycle, there were 3 other cars, a Porsche Boxster, a Lotus Elise, and a Volvo C70. They were all sports cars, but although they were sports cars, they were actually not expensive. The Porsche Boxster, the best GTS version in China, was sold for about $1,150,000. It was even cheaper in the United States, less than $80,000. The Lotus Elise was about $700,000 and was sold for more than $60,000 here. The Volvo C70, which was not sold in China, had a guide price of $600,000 and was sold for more than $60,000 here. Therefore, it was still very good to buy a car abroad. At least in terms of price, there was a lot of flexibility. The owners of these three cars were Alfred Sala, Belyak Trotsky, and Rayla Scarter. Valentina's motorcycle was not to be underestimated. The price of this motorcycle was not much cheaper than these cars. This motorcycle was a BMW HP4, which sold for more than $300,000 in China, and was sold for nearly $50,000 here. Chapter 778. You got drenched. Who told you not to buy a car? Looking at Valentina, who was drenched all over, Alcera said with a smile. Both of them used to be alpha wolves and now led a group. Valentina and Alcera were both competitors and friends. Belyak used to be a wolf, while Lei Lisi was not even a wolf, but a tarantula. Therefore, in terms of rank, they were not on the same level as Valentina and Alcera. Although they were treated the same in Zhang Hai's place, they dared not show off when Zhang Hai was not there. Usually, if Valentina and Alcera did not ask them, they would not dare to joke around. Your car is too slow. When Zhang Hai and the others went out to perform tasks, in addition to their weekly salary, they also received a salary from the group. In addition to this, the rental money belonged to Zhang Hai, and each of them had $150,000. This money was used to buy equipment, guns, and cars. The rest was their own. When they went out to carry out missions, the organization would also give them money, but the things they bought had to be returned to the organization after the mission. However, they still had their vision. They were very clear about what was good and what was suitable for them, so everything was well prepared. For example, the motorcycle that Valentina was riding now was quite famous. At present, the fastest motorcycle in the world should be the Dodge Tomahawk, but this kind of motorcycle was not allowed to be on the road. If it was on the road, the police would arrest it. It was the same in the United States. Such a motorcycle was not allowed to be on the road. In addition to this car, there were only two top motorcycles. One was the Falcon, and the other was the HP4. But everyone in the manor knew that Zhang Hai was different from Japan. The Falcon was a motorcycle of Suzuki, so she bought the HP4. It should be known that this motorcycle was much faster than a Bugatti Veyron in terms of acceleration. Yes, compared to a super sports car, this motorcycle was not much slower. Generally, domestic sports cars with a price of less than 1 million, or even 10 million, were not as fast as this motorcycle. The only thing that was definitely faster than this motorcycle was an F1, but it was not on the road. Hearing Valentina's words, Alcera curled her lips, then threw a bath towel over to her. At this time, Valentina had already taken off the leather jacket outside. This leather jacket was indeed very powerful. It was specially customized. This leather jacket had three functions. First, it was bulletproof, second, it was waterproof, and third, it could block heat and infrared rays so that people would not discover her existence. In fact, everyone had such a leather jacket, but some were leather jackets, and some were other clothes. After taking off the leather jacket, Valentina didn't care about these things. She took off her vest and underwear, then took the bath towel. While drying her hair, she walked upstairs. The leather jacket was hung up, and the vest and underwear were directly put into the washing machine. Then she sat on the sofa in the living room and watched TV. Alcera and the others also followed behind her. Looking at Valentina's appearance, Alcera thought for a moment and sat down. This time, the task was not completed. Have you thought about what to do next? Looking at Valentina, Alcera thought for a moment and asked her. Hearing her words, Valentina couldn't help but sigh and put down her feet that were originally on the coffee table. When the rain stops, I'll search along the shore. This is a stain on my record. I failed my first mission. Although Zhang Hai didn't blame me, why do I feel so uncomfortable in my heart? Hearing Al's words, Wagner said with some annoyance. To be honest, this was the first time that she didn't complete a mission, causing her to feel so uneasy. In the past, she would be very worried if she couldn't complete a mission. She was worried that the organization would punish her. However, ever since she became an alpha wolf, she no longer had to worry about these problems. This was because her identity allowed her to accept missions that she couldn't complete. But this task was so simple, so easy, and it was given by Zhang Hai, the most important person in her heart, but she didn't complete it. To be honest, her heart was a little flustered, not because of fear, but because of guilt. I hope your luck is good. Shrugging her shoulders, Sarah looked at Valentina and said. She couldn't comment on this matter. But even if Zhang Hai doesn't say anything, don't forget that there are two more powerful existences in Zhang Hai's family. Whether it was Galina or Azalina, both of them were much stronger than them. They were unwilling to lose just like that. As Sarah's voice fell, the living room became quiet, only the sound of the TV kept echoing. At this moment, a pizza advertisement was broadcast on the TV, which made the girls raise their eyebrows. Do you want to eat pizza? Looking at the others, Lizzie asked them. That's a good idea. Hearing her words, the other three people's eyes lit up and said with a smile. Hearing her words, everyone picked up their mobile phones and ordered takeout. As for the task, wait until the rain stops. The rain in summer is like this, it comes quickly and goes quickly. Especially in a coastal province like Massachusetts, after almost 2 hours of heavy rain, after the night was completely dark, the rain slowly subsided, and then the dark clouds in the sky gradually dispersed. As a bright moon shone in the sky, everyone also fell asleep. At this moment, in an abandoned cottage on the outskirts of Connecticut, a group of people were warming themselves over a bonfire. There were some rabbits and fishes on the bonfire. On the other side of the bonfire, there was an unconscious person. Connecticut is located next to Massachusetts and New York. It is bordered by Massachusetts to the north, New York to the west, Rhode Island to the east, and the sea to the south. It faces Long Island in New York. This state is most famous for two things. One is Yale University, and the other is the famous rich state in the United States. In 2005, it was ranked as the state with the highest per capita income in the United States, and that was an undeserved reputation. Such a high-income state is destined to have land worth a lot of money, and there are fewer people who will be farmers and ranchers. Therefore, in the area of Jianshu, to be honest, there are not many people, and it looks a bit desolate. The weather after the rain is a little cold, and this unconscious person is covered in water. As the cold wind blows, he can't help but shiver. He suddenly woke up and looked around in horror. As soon as he moved, the people on the other side also noticed him. Then two people came over and squatted in front of him. Who are you? Where is this? Looking at the people in front of him, Adis said with a horrified face. Because the person in front of him at this time is really terrifying. His face is smeared with various colors of oil paint, and he looks very embarrassed. His clothes are scraped, but he looks extremely fierce. He has a gun on his back and a gun on his waist. When he squats down, he can see the bandages wrapped around his palms. At first glance, he seems to have struggled from the line of life and death. It would be strange if he is not fierce. Now is not the time for you to ask me, but the time for us to ask you. Boy, who are you? Why did you appear by the river? Looking at you dressed like this, you should have money. We saved you. Are you not going to give us a reward? Looking at Adis in front of him, the man smiled disdainfully, and then said word by word. Hearing his words, Adis couldn't help but be a little confused. Hi, my name is Adis. I don't have much money now. As for why I fell into the river, it was because I was pushed down by someone. But as long as you take me to New York, I think I will give you some reward. After all, he has seen the world before. Although Adis is scared, he did not panic. Instead, he said calmly, "Tell me, what is your name?" Hearing his words, the people here did not respond, but a man in a mountaineering suit sitting next to the fire shouted, then walked quickly to Adis and asked him with shining eyes. I said, "My name is Adis. Do you know me?" Looking at the middle-aged man in front of him, thought about it carefully. It seems that he doesn't know him, but why does he know me? I know Chelsea's Kristen Adis. What is your relationship with him? Looking at Adis, the middle-aged man smiled and tried to be as polite as possible, then said to him, Kristen Adis is my father. Hearing that he knows his father, and then thinking of his father, Adis could not help but lower his head. He still remembers the picture of his father's last moment in his mind. Kristen is your father? Then why are you here? I remember that Kristen's power in Boston is not small. Looking at him, the middle-aged man in front of him said with some doubts. It's all because of Zhang Hai. My father has been killed by him. Speaking of this, Izzo's eyes were full of deep hatred. Chapter 779. Zhang Hai. Hearing these two words, these people's eyes instantly stood up, and then a bald man with a seriously burned face rushed out of the fire and picked up Izzo without saying a word. Tell me, what's the matter with Zhang Hai? A pair of fierce eyes stared at Izzo and roared angrily. Aye. Looking at the seriously disfigured man, Izzo was a little stunned and didn't know what to say. Well, don't scare this child. His body can't bear you like this. Seeing that Izzo didn't speak, the man turned around and was about to slap him, but he was stopped by the people next to him. Hearing the middle-aged man's words, a trace of hesitation flashed in the fierce man's eyes, and then he threw him on the haystack. Then he glared at Izzo fiercely and turned back to the fire. As for the middle-aged man, he slowly squatted down and looked at Izzo in front of him and said with half-squinted eyes. As you can see, your father and I are indeed old friends, and that guy, no, it can be said that Zhang Hai has a grudge against all of us. That guy's face is Zhang Hai's masterpiece. But I have never heard of Zhang Hai. Can you tell me about him? By the way, tell me about the conflict between you and him. Looking at Izzo the middle-aged man said with a smile. Zhang Hai. He is a strange man, a very strange man, because I don't know how to describe him. He came to the United States in the winter of the year before last and spent 280 million to buy a manor. At that time, everyone laughed at him, saying that he was a fool from Huaxia, but a year later, this guy moved everyone. Hearing the middle-aged man's words, Izzo also talked about Zhang Hai. He knows that he is now on the chopping block. If he doesn't behave, he may not see the sun tomorrow. He remembers what his father said, he has to be strong and live on. Then he told the middle-aged man in front of him about Zhang Hai. It is said that the person who knows you best is not your friend, but your enemy. Although Zhang Hai and Kristen have only been enemies for a few days, he still knows a lot about Zhang Hai, including how he came to the United States in the first place. His father even knew that he went to the NBA All-Star game the year before last and defeated Justin Bieber. His father knew about it, and then he sold his beef and got the 3 highest scores. After connecting with Walmart, he sold more than $1 billion in beef alone. At the same time, he did not stand still and was still raising fish. This year's beef sales were still the same as last year, but the quantity increased and the price increased again. According to Kristen estimation, Zhang Hai's beef sales this year are likely to reach $2 billion. After paying half of the taxes, he still has $1 billion left. At the same time, the fish farm is probably not bad. In the eyes of others, Zhang Hai may just be a rich man, but this is the United States, and the rich are everything. No one would have thought that Zhang Hai had such a strong fighting quality, and also raised such a group of women. Izzo did not think about this. In his eyes, Zhang Hai was like an unguarded rich man. So if he wanted to mess with him, he could mess with him. But this mess would separate him from his father forever. His father still had to see more thoroughly than he did. How could a rich man like Zhang Hai not have bodyguards? How could he not have trump cards? Do you think you are shooting a movie? The king has returned. Everything has to be said about a lone hero. Zhang Hai was not a lone hero. Although he did not play with quantity, he played with quality. From how Zhang Hai got rich, how much influence he has now, and why he is like this, Izzo told everything to the middle-aged man in front of him. Hearing Izzo the middle-aged man did not interrupt him. After he finished speaking, the middle-aged man pondered for a moment and asked him, "You just said that you kidnapped an Indian girl and wanted to force Zhang Hai to come over, right?" "Ah, yes." Hearing the middle-aged man's words, Izzo nodded helplessly. They used such a dirty trick, but they still lost, and lost so miserably. God really wants to kill him. Are you sure it's an Indian girl who just came out of the mountains? Looking at Izzo the middle-aged man asked seriously. "I'm very sure. The person who kidnapped her told me very clearly that this girl just came out of the mountains and came to Zhang Hai to give him something, but I don't know what it is." Hearing the man's words, Izzo said seriously, "Hey, I know what it is. I thought there was no chance, but now it seems that the opportunity has come again." Hearing Izzo words, the middle-aged man chuckled and said to the people behind him, Hey, we have work to do again. Then he turned his head again and looked at Xueqi in front of him. Young man, let me introduce myself. My name is Lynch Walter. I am an explorer. Are you interested in revenge? Looking at Xueqi in front of him, the middle-aged man. Oh no, Lynch Walter invited him with a smile on his face. You got up so early. Why don't you sleep a little longer? Walking down the stairs, Zhang Hai looked at Turok, who was lying in front of the fish tank curiously looking at the golden dragon swimming in the water, and asked with some doubts. I can't sleep. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Turok looked at him and said a little cautiously. Just treat this place as your own home. Since you're up, why don't you accompany me for a walk? Looking at Turok's appearance, Zhang Hai walked over with a smile. He knew that Turok's current mood could not be offset by Zhang Hai's words of, treat it as your own home. He could only let her slowly adapt to this place. Well, okay, by the way, what kind of fish is this? Can it be eaten? Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Turok smiled with satisfaction, then pointed to the fish in the fish tank and asked Zhang Hai. It was the first time she saw this kind of fish. This fish can be eaten, but basically no one will eat it, because this kind of fish is very expensive. Look at this fish tank, the cheapest one. I sell it for $100,000. Hearing her words, Zhang Hai thought for a moment, then said to her with a smile. Yes, Zhang Hai had spent, well, to be exact, donated $100,000 in exchange for it. After such a long time, these arowana have been completely reborn. Each arowana has aura injected by Zhang Hai. Although it is not much, it is enough for these arowana to use. Zhang Hai did not do it to increase their intelligence, but to make these fish grow better, that's all. These fish now all have the best appearance. Although the gold dragon did not transform into a red dragon or blood dragon, each and every one of them looks excellent. When Zhang Hai was playing, he took pictures and posted them on his WeChat moments. His friend, Huang Yunfei, who came to his place before, saw it. Then, when he was resting, he showed off to his colleagues. In the end, his boss saw it. When the boss saw Zhang Hai's fish, he directly asked if he was willing to sell it. He offered $600,000 for the smallest gold dragon, but Zhang Hai did not sell it. He was still counting on these gold dragons to make his white gold arowana. If he sold it now, it would be worthless. Wow, that's exaggerated. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Turok could not help but be a little speechless. She knew Zhang Hai was rich, but she did not know how much money Zhang Hai had. Looking at the fish tank, the cheapest one is $100,000, then this fish tank is worth millions. Thinking of this, she could not help but gently stick out her tongue. She really does not understand the hobbies of rich people. Let's go. Let's go to the manor and take a look. Looking at her, Zhang Hai waved his hand and led her to the manor. As soon as they walked out of the door, Zhang Hai could not help but take a deep breath. The rain last night made the ground and the air a little moist. In addition, they were by the sea, so naturally, moisture was indispensable. But Zhang Hai was already a little used to it. When Turok came out, the first thing she paid attention to was not this, but the two big dogs that were running around in the grass. These two guys would run around every morning, not caring if the grass was wet or not. Instead, they played very happily. When they heard the sound, they also looked in the direction of the villa. When they saw Zhang Hai and Turok coming out, they quickly ran over and kept circling Zhang Hai. In the end, after Zhang Hai kicked them, they went to play with Turok. Zhang Hai casually walked in front. Today, he wanted to bring Turok to familiarize himself with the manor. After all, she will be living here in the future. Seeing Zhang Hai walk away, Turok played with the dogs while following Zhang Hai along the corridor that Zhang Hai specially built for the manor. Let me introduce you to the manor first. First, I will give you a brief introduction of my manor. Here is the vegetable field. We grow our own vegetables. Next to the vegetable field is the vineyard, but it is still not ripe yet. After the vineyard, on the far right is the cowshed. The stable and the cowherd's nest are also there. If you walk further, you will reach my pier. The other side of the pier can be walked back, but you will have to pass through a forest. There are many fierce beasts in the forest, so if you don't have to, don't go in easily. While walking, Zhang Hai explained the situation of his manor to Turok. Turok also listened carefully, fearing that he would miss something. Chapter 780. It's too hot. Sitting under the shade of the tree, Jiang Hai looked at the sky helplessly. He had to admit that there were 4 seasons in this year, and there were hot and cold times. In fact, it was fine when it was cold. Jiang Hai's home had floor heating. Even if it was cold, he wouldn't freeze. But this heat really made Jiang Hai feel a little helpless. He was lazy and didn't have any energy at all. In fact, Boston was still fine. After all, it was located in the north, and it was next to the ocean. So in summer, it was much cooler here compared to the central and southern parts of the United States, where it was often 40 degrees. The highest temperature was about 30 degrees, and because of the heat absorption of seawater, the temperature difference between day and night was still very large. But Jiang Hai still felt very hot. He didn't want to move as he was paralyzed here. In fact, he could go back to the house to enjoy the air conditioner. In the past, Jiang Hai liked to enjoy the air conditioner because it was really cool. Although he felt a little suffocated because he had to close the windows when the air conditioner was turned on, since Jiang Hai had the Dragon Balls, he had no interest in the air conditioner. He preferred natural air, but the problem now was that natural air was also very hot. Gently wiping the sweat on his face, Jiang Hai played with the mobile phone in one hand, but the other hand was fanning himself. Because it was too hot recently, Jiang Hai didn't go around to catch little elves, so he put the game aside for the time being. Moreover, there were no dojos and supply points near his home, which was very troublesome. After all, there were no landmark buildings. He opened the WeChat installed on the mobile phone, which could be used abroad. In fact, it could be used as long as there was internet. Jiang Hai's account had been changed to a global call at the very beginning, so he could make calls anywhere. Although the phone bill was a little expensive, did Jiang Hai lack this little money? Really, after opening WeChat, a picture popped up that made Jiang Hai stunned. It was a picture of autumn with 2 big words written on it. Beginning of autumn. Seeing this scene, Jiang Hai couldn't help but blink. It's Li Qiu? Seeing this, Jiang Hai immediately flipped open the calendar. Sure enough, it was Li Qiu today. When he thought of Li Qiu, Jiang Hai's thoughts couldn't help but drift back to a long time ago, when his parents were still alive. Northeastern people love to eat dumplings and noodles, so in the northeastern part of Huaxia, it was either dumplings or noodles during festivals. It was inevitable to eat dumplings at the 30th Lunar New Year. Spring pancakes were eaten at the beginning of spring. Noodles were eaten at the beginning of summer. Dumplings were also eaten at the beginning of autumn because there was meat inside. Dumplings were eaten at the beginning of winter. Usually, they were also particular about eating dumplings when they got on the bus and noodles when they got off the bus. As long as they went out, such as to attend a meeting or go out to play, they had to eat dumplings before they left. This also showed how much northeastern people loved to eat dumplings. Jiang Hai was a very pure northeastern person, so he also liked to eat dumplings, but there weren't many opportunities to eat dumplings. This was because no one here knew how to make dumplings. Xiaoya knew how to make dumplings, but she was the only one who knew how to make dumplings. There were too many people here. Qijia, Chia, Feng Yunchen, Ai Xiaoxi, Daliana, Marian, Aphrodite, Dana, Hilda, Paige, Shira, Ohilia, Bridget, Janice, Wallace Shelley, Galena, Azalina, and Tarak. Just the women here, Jiang Hai had 18. Each person ate 30 dumplings, which was 540 dumplings. In addition, Jiang Hai had to eat 40 to 50 dumplings, which was 600 dumplings. This would exhaust Chia to death. So usually, when Chia didn't say anything, Jiang Hai and the others didn't think of eating dumplings. But now, looking at the season, Jiang Hai suddenly had the intention to eat this thing. Let's go and discuss with them. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai, who had just eaten breakfast, suddenly felt hungry, so he rolled down from his recliner and walked into the room. When he entered the room, he just saw Chia and Wallace Shelley sitting on the sofa watching TV. Now, the people in Jiang Hai's villa had their own division of labor. Chia was responsible for cooking. Of course, in addition to breakfast, lunch and dinner, there were people helping Chia. Wallace Shelley was mainly responsible for the application of information. Don't look at her delicate appearance, she was an expert in information, and her hacking skills were first class. It was precisely for this reason that she didn't sacrifice her body in exchange for information in the organization. She only needed a general direction, and she could find what she wanted to know. A while ago, when Valentina went after Izzo and the others, the police couldn't find them. However, she was able to find out where Izzo and the others were through some clues. From this, it could be seen that Wallace Shelley's strength was indeed not bad. But unfortunately, Izzo's location was not found, and Valentina had been very depressed about this. When she came back last week, she took the initiative to ask Jiang Hai to punish her. In the end, Jiang Hai spanked her 20 times, but as a result, Jiang Hai felt something and took her blood. Then Azalina next to her asked, was this a punishment or a reward? She couldn't understand some of it. Although Izzo's case was no longer believed, Valentina was still investigating these people. If she couldn't find these people, she wouldn't be able to eat or sleep in peace. Recently, Wallace Shelley had been following up on Izzo's matter. Jalina and Azalina basically stayed together all day long. Azalina was obsessed with magic and would wander around the manor aimlessly, while Jalina would wander around with her. At the same time, Jalina was also the most knowledgeable about guns. She liked guns very much. She liked all kinds of guns. Therefore, if she saw two women strolling around in the manor, one of them dismantling a gun and then reassembling it, she wouldn't be surprised, because it was a very normal thing. Every morning, Aphrodite and the others would go to the vineyard to work. If there wasn't any work in the vineyard, they would go to the vegetable fields to take a look. They had something to do every day. Recently, Delina, Marian, and Tarak were attending classes. This was mainly because of Tarak and Qi Jia. In the letter that the patriarch sent to Jiang Hai, he said that he hoped that Tarak could come out and learn some knowledge. And the best way to learn knowledge was naturally to go to school. But Tarak's knowledge was all learned from the patriarch. The patriarch learned from his comrades during World War II, and also self-taught himself. How good could he be? It was already good that Tarak could speak English. He didn't teach her anything else, and Tarak was already 18 years old this year. According to her age, she should be going to university. But her level wasn't even high school. An elementary school student might be better than her. After understanding this situation, Jiang Hai thought for a moment. With her age, it was impossible for her to go to primary school with a bunch of kids. So if she wanted to go to high school, she should go to high school. Because of this, Jiang Hai enrolled her in Winthrop High School. Of course, she would come back to sleep every day. In any case, Hua Lizi and the others usually didn't have anything to do. Sending her to school wasn't a problem, but there was a problem. What about her previous knowledge? At this time, the patriarch, who usually had the responsibility of being a doctor, shouldered the responsibility of teaching her. Delina and Marian's level of knowledge was not much worse than Tarak's, so they were also sent to learn by Jiang Hai. Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yunchen had been very busy recently because they were really very free. In addition, because they had been models in the past, they had met a lot of women who looked like they had some money, but in reality they didn't have much money, but still had to pretend to be ostentatious. When women were together, other than their respective husbands and boyfriends, they also talked about bags, clothes, and makeup products. These were all things that they had to talk about. So the two of them recently became addicted to buying things on behalf of others. Now, everyone in the town knew that they were Jiang Hai's women. Naturally, when they went to the town to buy things, it was basically the purchase price. And these makeup products, bags, clothes, and so on in the United States, although they weren't top luxury brands, when they were brought back to China, there were inexplicably 13 boxes. So when they were usually seen, they were either holding a computer or a mobile phone. Jiang Hai was also used to this. He was also very happy that they could find something they were willing to do. Jiang Hai was also quite happy. Otherwise, it would be quite boring for them to stay at home all day long. Seeing Jiang Hai come in, Chia and Wallace Shelley couldn't help but look at Jiang Hai. Why aren't you lying down? Seeing Jiang Hai, who had always been relaxed, come in, the two women couldn't help but ask him with a smile. Hey, today is Lichio, so I think let's eat dumplings today. Looking at Chia, Jiang Hai said with a smile. Eating dumplings is okay, but it's very tiring. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Chia frowned. She was not the kind of person who would refuse others, so after hearing Jiang Hai's words, she first agreed, and then said with some helplessness. Let's help together. You can tell us what to do. As a Northeasterner, you can't not eat dumplings all day long. Listening to Chia's words, Jiang Hai said with a smile. Hearing what he said, Chia thought about it and nodded. To be honest, she also wanted to eat dumplings. Since Zhang Hai said so, then everyone could also prepare. The first preparation to make dumplings was to knead the dough. Hearing that Zhang Hai could ask others to come and help, Chia went to knead the dumpling dough first. A large basin of dough was first distributed there. After all, they had to make 600 or 700 dumplings, so the amount of dough was indispensable. Chapter 781. The dough is ready. After seeing that the noodles had started to ferment, Chia looked at Zhang Hai and said with a smile. Hearing Chia's words, Zhang Hai couldn't help but smile. Then he started to think about what kind of fillings to make. In the northeast, there were 4 kinds of fillings for dumplings. The first one was chives, the second one was cabbage, the third one was pickled cabbage, and the fourth one was sansien. Everyone had eaten chives. It was said to be good for men and was also known as aphrodisiac. This thing was very popular in China, but foreigners didn't eat leeks abroad because leeks had a very bad smell. Chives were also called vegetarian meat in Buddhism. True Buddhists didn't eat chives. Americans also felt that the taste was very strange. Most importantly, chives were particularly easy to get worms. The worms were called leeks. They were very harmful and disgusting, so no one ate them in the United States. Zhang Hai usually liked to eat scrambled eggs with chives, so he planted some, but it was very little. It should be a perennial plant. After a piece was cut, another piece would grow, but because it grew too much, it didn't taste good. The best chives were planted in March. Now, in August, they didn't taste good anymore. There was no need to talk about cabbage. Everyone knew about cabbage. Zhang Hai had planted a lot of it in his manor. Pickled cabbage was different in Huaxia because of the difference between the north and the south. In the south, the pickled cabbage was also pickled, but it was soaked in big leaf green, also known as green cabbage. In the advertisement, it was the Lautan pickled cabbage. It was used to make pickled cabbage fish, pickled cabbage vermicelli, and so on. The pickled cabbage in the north is pickled cabbage. After being pickled, it is sour and delicious. When used to make dumplings, it will not be very refreshing and will not be too greasy. However, Zhang Hai does not like to eat this kind of thing, and now there is no pickled cabbage. It was soaked in autumn and eaten in winter. Dumplings with 3 delicacies basically referred to chives, meat, and shrimps. But as mentioned earlier, chives were not very delicious now. Most importantly, foreigners didn't eat chives, so Zhang Hai and Chia felt that it was a little troublesome after discussing it. Don't tell me you want cabbage? If it really didn't work, they could only make cabbage and meat. What's there to think about? We can make whatever stuffing we want. It's not like we're trying to sell it. Hearing the conversation between Zhang Hai and Chia, Huali Shelley looked at them and asked, that's true. Then what kind of filling should I make? Hearing her words, Zhang Hai and Chia looked at each other, then laughed self-deprecatingly. They looked at each other, then began to discuss. You must have pork in your dumplings. The fish and shrimp here are not bad. Why don't we make a cabbage fish, shrimp, and pork dumpling? Thinking for a moment, the main ingredient of the dish can only be cabbage, but there are many choices for meat. They can choose anything they want. They added cabbage because they were afraid that it would be boring to eat all meat. Cabbage is refreshing. Okay, I'll go and prepare these things first, and then call them back. They can help in a while. Hearing her words, Zhang Hai patted his forehead and said eagerly. Originally, this proposal was proposed by him, so naturally now it's up to him. Thinking of this, he wanted to get up and leave, but was stopped by Chia. Why are you in such a hurry now? It's almost noon. When they come back for lunch, you can tell them. Hearing her words, Zhang Hai scratched his head. It seems that he was a little too excited. Smiling awkwardly, Zhang Hai and Chia also began to discuss how to make these dumplings. The dumplings were wrapped in different ways, and the cooking method was different, but the name was also the same. Boiled dumplings were called water dumplings, used dough, and tasted good with soup. After eating, a bowl of dumpling soup would melt the original food into the original soup, and it would be very comfortable. Steamed dumplings were called steamed dumplings, used dough, and the method of mixing dough was different. Fried dumplings were called pan-fried dumplings, And pan-fried dumplings also had to be fried in water. Using dead dough, they tasted fragrant and crispy, but eating too much would make the stomach uncomfortable because it was not easy to digest. After Zhang Hai and Chia discussed it, they decided to boil a portion and steam a portion. Unknowingly, it was time for lunch. Aphrodite and the others were also busy all morning. After returning home, after taking a cold shower, everyone prepared lunch together. While eating, Zhang Hai told them about the dumplings they were going to eat tonight. Although everyone did not know how to make dumplings, their enthusiasm for eating dumplings was very good. Especially Delina and Marian. Last year, Zhang Hai took them with him when he went back for the new year. It was the new year, and they didn't always eat dumplings in the northeast. After eating dumplings for a while, they became addicted to eating dumplings, but unfortunately, they haven't eaten dumplings since they came back. As for the others, they had only heard of eating dumplings before, but few had eaten authentic ones. Of course, Qi Jia, Ai Xiaoxi, and Feng Yunchen from Huaxia often ate dumplings. Now that they heard that Zhang Hai wanted to eat dumplings, they also wanted to eat dumplings. After deciding to eat dumplings in the evening, everyone began to work in batches. Getting pork, fish, and shrimp was naturally Zhang Hai's job. As for cleaning up after returning, mincing and so on, it was all left to these women. After eating lunch, Zhang Hai went to get ingredients. He first went to get pork. Zhang Hai raised pigs in his manor. He didn't know if he still remembered, but he returned to China in the middle of the year last year. In addition to getting a lot of Yangtze River grenadier fish and Chinese bahaba fish, he also got a lot of things from the ground. There was meat donkey from Lu Province, fragrant pig from Tsong River, 9 caddies yellow chicken, sand nest radish, Langshan chicken, and rice. After the beginning of spring this year, rice and radish had been planted, but they weren't ripe yet. Some fragrant pig and chicken had already been eaten. The growth of chickens was very fast. In China, a normal chicken would be ready for slaughter in 1.5 months. At that time, Zhang Hai still remembered that someone on the internet said that his white feather chicken was ready for slaughter in 2 months. What kind of chicken could it be? It must have been injected with hormones or something. At the beginning, Zhang Hai was also a keyboard player. But later, he had a distant relative from the countryside. When he came to the city for business, he ate at his house. When they talked, he mentioned this matter. Then this person said, if it's ready for slaughter in 2 months, then isn't the chicken already old? Later, Zhang Hai checked and found out that generally speaking, meat chickens were sold for 40 to 50 days. The free-range chickens raised in the countryside, the so-called free-range chickens and stupid chickens, would be raised for a long time, but basically, it wouldn't be more than a year. Zhang Hai's chickens were free-range chickens. They were basically raised for fun. If they laid eggs, they would be kept. If they couldn't be collected in time, they would hatch. If they wanted to eat, they would kill one to eat. So, a lot of chickens were killed but not too many donkeys and pigs. Zhang Hai's target this time was those pigs. Among the pigs that Zhang Hai bought, there were a lot of boars and a lot of sows. But basically, the boars had undergone surgery. They were the kind that could practice the sunflower manual. Only one breeding pig was left. In the ancient Huaxia, very few people ate pork. This was because if the boar didn't undergo surgery, the meat would be smelly and smelly. So, to be honest, the Huaxia started to eat pork seriously in the Ming dynasty. Although it was popularized in the Song dynasty, not many people ate it. Before the Ming dynasty, high officials and nobles had to eat mutton. Beef was an important production tool, and ordinary people ate dog meat. So in ancient times, there was a saying, hang a sheep's head and sell dog meat. It also meant that the meat was shoddy. After almost a year of raising Zhang Hai's pigs, it wasn't an exaggeration to say that they were all fat and strong. But these pigs were fragrant pigs after all. After a year of raising them, they weren't very big. They weren't like the old sows in the countryside that weighed a few 100 kilograms. When they went there, they were so fierce that even people had to give way sometimes, let alone dogs. Zhang Hai's fragrant pigs weren't big. This kind of pig rarely weighed more than 30 kilograms. But because the food that Zhang Hai ate here was spiritual, while their size wasn't big, their weight had increased a little. They were about 40 kilograms, but the meat was quite good. Zhang Hai drove the 4-wheeled motorcycle to the fragrant pig house. After he arrived outside the fragrant pig house, He directly went in and caught a fragrant pig. He killed it by the river. With Zhang Hai's current physical fitness, what use could a pig have? Because Zhang Hai didn't have the habit of eating slaughtered pork, the blood and internal organs were thrown into the river that he dug. The only thing he ate was the pig liver. Thrown into the river, these things wouldn't go to waste. There were a lot of fish in the river at this time. In addition to the ones that Zhang Hai raised, there were a lot of eels and the like. These things were all fun to play with. After a simple cleaning of the pig, Zhang Hai first pulled it back. Qi and the others would naturally clean up the pork. Then Zhang Hai rode his four-wheeled motorcycle to the beach. Diving into the sea, he first caught a lot of abalone and sea cucumbers. These things were also delicious after being cut up and wrapped in dumplings. Then, he got a salmon. He had never eaten salmon dumplings before. He also caught a lot of prawns. Because they were going to be wrapped in the dumplings, 2 big prawns were not good, so he caught some small Arctic red prawns. After everything was done, he returned home. When he got home, the women had almost finished cleaning up the pig. Usually, it was very troublesome to clean up a pig, but because Zhang Hai and the others didn't eat the skin, it was easy to directly peel off the skin. There was no need to roast the pig's hair or anything like that. The pig's head was also thrown away, and no one ate it. The only thing that they ate was the meat. Chapter 782. I'm back. As Zhang Hai walked in carrying 2 baskets of seafood with a smile on his face, everyone who was busy inside the villa raised their heads. When it comes to cleaning up the pigs, it can be said that no one in Zhang Hai's villa had ever cleaned up a pig before. But after Aphrodite and the others entered Zhang Hai's villa, their hearts were set on becoming Zhang Hai's servants. Therefore, when it came to cleaning up the pork, they were still the main ones. As for the commander, it was Ai Xueqi. She was the only one who had seen pigs being slaughtered before. When Zhang Hai came back, the pork was almost done and the meat was being shaved. Although Zhang Hai didn't eat fatty meat, making dumplings required some fatty meat in order to roll up the filling. Therefore, Aphrodite and the others still stirred up some fatty meat and made it into minced meat to eat. After seeing Zhang Hai come back, everyone gave a simple response. Then they took the 2 baskets of food from Zhang Hai's hands and took the initiative to wash them in the kitchen. Zhang Hai's abalones were all wild abalones. Wild abalones were chewy and delicious, but there was one thing that was very troublesome. Because they were wild, and Zhang Hai dug them out to be very big. Therefore, there were a lot of things attached to the abalones, such as some gravel, hair and other shells, which were very dirty. Therefore, they needed to be brushed directly to get rid of the things that could be removed. Then they needed to be boiled. Next, they needed to dig out the meat, throw away the green internal organs, and cut the meat into pieces to make minced meat. It was the same for the sea cucumbers. Although they had already spat out their internal organs when Zhang Hai caught them in the sea, the skin still needed to be washed. While they were cleaning up the sea cucumbers and abalones, Zhang Hai and the others didn't stay idle. They took out the prawns and used a toothpick to reach into the back of the prawns' heads and pick out the prawn lines. These prawn lines were full of dirty things. If they weren't picked out, the prawns would have a stinky taste and wouldn't be clean. After everything was done, Zhang Hai and the others also began to divide the work. After about an hour, all the ingredients were prepared. Then they began to make the minced meat. They put the finely diced sea cucumbers, abalones, cut cabbage, and the pork that had been prepared with a meat blender into a large basin. Then they put in salt, cooked oil, cooking wine, and other things to marinate. Then, they used the soup made from the leftover pig bones as water. After it was slightly diluted, they were put in the freezer. Then, she divided the prawns into 2 sections and placed 1 section in each dumpling. After she was done, Qi also made the noodles. At this time, the dough that was distributed in the morning had turned into a large lump. Qi was the main hand, and Zhang Hai and the others helped to get the dough out. After the dough was cut, they kneaded it again and put it in the basin. Then, Qi began to teach everyone how to make the dough and make dumplings. Speaking of which, making dumplings was very simple. Spread out the dough, put the filling in the middle, and put half a prawn on the side. This was half done. Then they had to pinch it. They couldn't pinch the filling out. They also had to control their strength and make the dough stick together. But making the dough was very troublesome. They had to make the dough bulge in the middle and thin on both sides. This was a technical job. After trying for a long time, Chia found that Ai Xiaoxi, Feng Yunchen, Aphrodite, and Hilda had such talent. So she took out the rolling pin and the 5 of them started to make the dough. Zhang Hai and the others made the dumplings at the side. Although the dumplings looked very strange, the atmosphere at the scene was quite good. Everyone was talking and laughing as they made the dumplings. Because they ate beef and seafood all year round, even without Zhang Hai's infusion of spiritual energy, these women's physical fitness had become very good after absorbing the spiritual energy. They didn't feel too tired when making the dumplings. Curtain after curtain of dumplings were made, and each of them stood quietly at the side like little ingots. Looking at the scene in front of him and listening to the laughter, Zhang Hai couldn't help but think of when he was young. That should be 10 years ago? No, it should be 20 years ago. At that time, not only were his parents there, but his grandfather, grandmother, grandmother, and grandfather were also there. Every New Year, when Zhang Hai and the others were 30 years old, they would celebrate the New Year at his grandfather's house. Back then, his parents, his grandfather's family, and his 2 aunts would all gather there. The women would watch the Spring Festival Gala and make dumplings while he, his father, his grandfather, and his brother and sister would wait for the most boring performance of the Spring Festival Gala. Then, they would go downstairs to play with firecrackers. It was the same on the 3rd day of the New Year. They would go to his grandparents' house. But he didn't know when it started. Maybe it was after the older generation passed away. But the New Year didn't feel lively anymore. Other than the closed restaurants everywhere, there was almost no trace of the New Year. Especially in recent years, the New Year was the most troublesome time for Zhang Hai. Because there were thousands of lights, but he only had himself. But last year was still okay. After spending the New Year at his mother-in-law's house, there was finally some liveliness. This year, Zhang Hai really wanted to spend the New Year at home because he felt that his family was celebrating the New Year. Hey, what are you thinking about? Are you lost in thought? Just as Zhang Hai was sighing, Qijie couldn't help but wipe Zhang Hai's face with her hands and said with a smile. Hearing her words, Zhang Hai didn't say anything. He just picked up his hand and tapped her nose. Then he chuckled. Home, this is my home, isn't it? Although this family doesn't seem to be too united now, one day, it will be. With a smile, Zhang Hai put more focus on the dumplings in front of him. As Zhang Hai came back to his senses, everyone started to make the dumplings again. Every girl had a different personality. Every person was a living being. Zhang Hai really felt that this wasn't a dream. Everything was real. This was Winthrop, Zhang Hai's soaring dragon manor. After a while, the dumplings were almost done. Unknowingly, it was already past 4 in the afternoon. Chia, who had been busy for a long time and was hungry, ordered everyone to steam the dumplings and boil the dumplings. Everyone was busy. At 5 o'clock, everything was ready. With Zhang Hai's order, everyone who had already prepared the condiments stretched out their chopsticks and picked up the dumplings in front of them. Zhang Hai didn't want to be outdone. He directly picked up a piece. He didn't dip the first dumpling into the condiments. Instead, he took a bite. However, this bite almost didn't burn him because there was soup in the filling. The soup was already frozen, so he didn't notice it when he was making the dumpling. However, after it was cooked, the filling of the dumpling was still clumped together with some soup. When he bit down, the hot soup rushed out. Although it was very hot, Zhang Hai couldn't bear to spit it out. This soup was really too fresh and delicious. The taste of meat, bones, abalone, sea cucumber, prawns, and cabbage were perfectly blended together in this soup. When he bit down, the feeling of the soup and filling was really great. After taking a few deep breaths, Zhang Hai chewed half of the dumpling. Then, he couldn't wait to eat the remaining half. Zhang Hai wasn't the only gluttonous person who was scalded like Zhang Hai. For a while, the sound of cold air was heard on the dining table. Although it was hot, no one spat out the dumplings in their mouths. First, it was because of the delicious taste. Second, it was because of the atmosphere. Usually, the people in Zhang Hai's manor weren't as harmonious as today. After today, Zhang Hai felt that the estrangement between everyone had decreased a lot. Next time, when Valentina and the others come back, let's also make dumplings to eat. Let's do it together. Looking at the lively atmosphere in front of her, Azalina came over and whispered. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also nodded with a smile. That's right. While Jiang Hai and the others were eating happily here, another group of people was not so happy. At this time, on the other side of the United States, Massachusetts was the northeast corner of the United States, and the line of sight was now turned to the southwest corner. California, or California for short, in Huaxia, was second only to New York. In fact, this was the case. All the cities in the world were added together. New York was the first in the world, and Los Angeles was the second in the world. But now, the goal of the line of sight was not Los Angeles, but Santa Clara County. It should be said that this name was still a little unfamiliar to everyone, but when it came to another name, everyone would probably say, "Oh, so it's here." Silicon Valley, the headquarters of the United States, where high-tech enterprises gathered. At this time, on the streets of Santa Clara County, a middle-aged man was walking forward with a bottle of wine in his hand. From time to time, he would take a sip from his mouth. The decadence on this middle-aged man's face and the smell of alcohol on his body were not unfamiliar to the people in this area. Entrepreneurship distribution centers were naturally unemployment distribution centers. When some people succeeded, there would be more people who failed. So in New York and Silicon Valley, such a figure was really normal. At this time, this person was like this, swaying while cursing someone. He came to a community with good greenery, then walked into a small villa. After swaying, he took out the key to open the door and walked into his bedroom. But just as he turned on the light, his pupils instantly dilated because the room that should have been empty was full of people at this time. Looking at these people, a stream of cold sweat slowly flowed down from his forehead. "Who are you? What are you doing in my house?" While leaning against the wall, the man asked, and at the same time, his hand reached for the door handle. At this time, his original intoxicated state was gone. It seemed that fright was always a good way to sober up. "We are your friends, Marvin." Marion Smith. Hearing his words, a middle-aged man in a mountaineering suit walked out with a smile. Chapter 783. After eating dumplings, the relationship between the girls in Jiang Hai's villa was brought closer. In the past, there was only one reason why these girls would live here, and that was because of Jiang Hai. Although it was still because of Jiang Hai, the relationship between these people had quietly improved. A woman's friendship was different from a man's. Between men, it was possible to see eye to eye. After a drink, they would become good friends. The four ironies in life were to carry guns together, go through windows together, share the loot together, and have girlfriends together. Cuff. It was not to be said. Therefore, when men gathered together, they were true friends, regardless of social status. Of course, people's hearts were the most unpredictable. Maybe you don't care about your net worth, but your friends might care about it. However, if he really picked these things, it meant that he did not treat you as a true friend. Fortunately, the relationship between Jiang Hai's friends was quite good. No matter when Jiang Hai was good or bad, their relationship was still quite good. They were still in contact on WeChat. As for making friends between women, it was different from men. When they were together, they would show off. "Look at my watch, my bag, my ring, my makeup products." In the end, it would be how capable my husband was. The friendship between women was torn apart. Just like Xiang Yu's words, if you don't return to your hometown when you're rich, it's like walking in the night with cotton clothes. They were basically in the state of Xiang Yu. Of course, there were some who were more indifferent. However, such people were very rare. It was difficult for Jiang Hai's women to form a friendship because they had nothing to tear apart. No matter what Jiang Hai did, he had to be fair. If he bought something for one person, everyone would have it. If the price was about the same, it was up to you. As long as you pointed it out, he would buy it. Therefore, although his women's clothes, bags, watches, jewelry, and makeup products were different, the price was about the same. How could they show off? If they showed off here and there, wouldn't their man be the same person? At this time, they had to consider the palace fights in the ancient times of Huaxia. Fortunately, Jiang Hai's people were not divided into ranks. They were all educated people, so naturally, they wouldn't feel that they were superior to others. Therefore, even though they couldn't fight each other, their relationship had never been particularly good. Especially Qi Jia, Qi Ya, Feng Yunchen, and Ai Xiaoxi. These were the two biggest gangs. However, after eating dumplings, everyone's relationship became closer. This was something that Zhang Hai did not expect. While Qi Jie was teaching Taraga, Marian, and Delina, Feng Yunchen and Ai Xiaoxi would also go over to take a look. Qi Jie's grades were the highest here. She could open a research center on her own, which meant that she had at least a doctorate degree. However, she was still a little far from high school, while Ai Xiaoxi was much closer to it. Ai Xiaoxi could be admitted to a university in the capital. She was also a top student in their school. She scored more than 600 points in the college entrance examination. Although she was not the best in the country, she was definitely very good in her studies. Don't forget that Lu province was one of the most difficult provinces in the country. Ai Xiaoxi's learning level was not bad. Perhaps she might be a little worse in the things after college, but she could still remember the things from middle school and high school very well. With her joining them, Raja and the others learned a little faster. However, it was impossible for them to learn all the things they had learned in the past few years before school started. They had to learn as much as they could. The holidays in American high schools were somewhat similar to those in China, but also somewhat different. In fact, since the founding of Huaxia, many things were learned from America. For example, driving the steering wheel was on the left and driving on the right. Students also had holidays. However, this holiday was somewhat similar, but also somewhat different. There were a total of 4 holidays in America. Among them, the winter holiday was quite fragmented. The Thanksgiving holiday was around a week, and the Christmas holiday was after the New Year. Therefore, their holidays were quite fragmented, and they did not pay much attention to the winter holiday. The summer holiday was a holiday that Americans paid much attention to. It started in June and lasted until September. It was a 3-month holiday. The new school year was also around this time. September 1st was the first day of school for this year's Winthrop High School. Zhang Hai also enrolled Taraga in this school year. As for Marian and Delina, they were still unwilling to go to school. Zhang Hai did not intend to force them to go to school, because he was a person who did not like to go to school. The women in the villa were working according to their schedule. Normally, Zhang Hai was really very free. Every morning, after having breakfast, he would walk around the manor. At around 10 o'clock, he would be free. He would lie down on the reclining chair and have lunch. In the afternoon, he would lie down outside and wait for dinner. After that, the day would pass. It was because he really had nothing to do. He remembered a saying in the past, "Those who take care of everything personally will eventually die of exhaustion." Just like the famous Zhuge Liang of the Three Kingdoms, he had to take care of everything and eventually died of exhaustion. Zhang Hai was famous for not doubting the people he used, and not using the people he doubted. He was not very good at fishing and herding, so he left it to the professionals. Zhang Hai spent so much money, and Edouard Anderson and Robbins Garcia were very attentive. Of course, some people would say that Zhang Hai did not care about these people. Wasn't he afraid that these people would make things difficult for him, or even bully him? Just like his good friends, their hearts were extremely dark. However, Zhang Hai did not care about this. Because for him, the existence of these people was not inevitable, and they were very clear about this. They knew that Zhang Hai's manor was popular because Zhang Hai had mastered the core technology, and it had nothing to do with them. If they did not do a good job, Zhang Hai could change a group of people, and it would be the same, but if they left, they would not be able to find such good jobs. They would not trade for hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars a year for a lawyer. But today, Zhang Hai, who was usually very lazy, was diligent for once. He got up early in the morning and walked around the manor. At 9 o'clock, he met up with Robbins Garcia and went to the home of Cotton Harris, the second largest manor owner in Winthrop. Today was the day that all the people on the ground that Zhang Hai had taken over were moving away. It was reasonable for Zhang Hai to send them off. So when they got up in the morning, the two of them drove the war shield that Zhang Hai had just sent back to Cotton Harris's home. When they arrived at Cotton Harris's home, they found that people were already there. For example, Old George, whom Zhang Hai was very familiar with, Carrie Clark, Xueqi Eddie, whom Zhang Hai had once helped, and Cotton Harris and others. These people were all waiting for Zhang Hai. Seeing that Zhang Hai's car was parked, everyone got out of the car and said to Zhang Hai with a smile, "Zhang, you're finally here." Hearing their words, Zhang Hai also laughed and said, "Haha, I can't help it. This road is still very shabby. From today onwards, this place is all yours. You can take your time to fix it. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Cotton Harris also laughed and said. The fact that Zhang Hai was very lazy was not a secret in Winthrop. Almost everyone knew that. Generally speaking, fishermen and cowboys were hard-working people. But Zhang Hai made it very comfortable. Not only was there an artificial river in the manor, but there were also tree-lined paths. At night, there were street lights. This year, a roof was directly built on the grass. If it rained, the cowboys could even go to the corridor to rest. The fisherman's wharf also had a lot of huts, but those huts, to be honest, were much better than the workers' houses. Although there was no way to compare with the small villa that Zhang Hai had allocated, it was still a place that other fishermen envied. So, spending money like Zhang Hai was their wish. Don't worry, I will treat your pasture well. After exchanging a few pleasantries, Zhang Hai also said to them solemnly. To be honest, after these pasture lands were in his hands, Zhang Hai was not in a hurry to transform them immediately. Instead, he was going to remove all the grass and plant new grass seeds. At that time, all of them would be planted with alfalfa and emperor bamboo grass, and some Chinese medicinal herbs in the middle. Then he would nourish them with his aura. At that time, the grass growing on these pasture lands would become the existence that witnessed miracles. Do whatever you want. If you need any help, just let us know. We are not far from you. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, the people here laughed and said. Zhang Hai had spent a lot of money to buy their pasture lands. Of course, Zhang Hai was not a spendthrift. It was because he really did not lack money. He also did not care about this small amount of money. These pastures were something he had to buy. And after these manor owners received the money, most of them did not choose to go to the city to enjoy themselves. Instead, they directly bought a piece of land south of Winthrop and resumed their previous business. After spending the money that Zhang Hai had spent, about 3/4 of the money was used to buy an identical manor. There was still a quarter left, which was very suitable. Because of these people's actions, the land price in Winthrop increased by about 5%. But for the people in Winthrop, this did not matter. First, it was because Americans did not have the habit of buying. They preferred to rent houses, especially some middle-aged people and young people. Second, it was because they were now rich people. But this increase in land price was a very troublesome thing for some Huaxia people, because they were also here to buy land. Chapter 784. The Chinese people's obsession with land should be the most famous in the world. Even the establishment of the current dynasty had an inseparable relationship with the word land division. Everyone knew that the Chinese people liked land and wanted to have more children. This could be seen in the United States. However, in Huaxia, because of some government regulations, children at Zhang Hai's age were basically only children. Of course, now the second child policy was opened, giving newlyweds more opportunities. Although Zhang Hai was not like the older generation who had a strong obsession with land, he still liked the idea of having a lot of land. After having a meal with Cotton Harris and the others as a farewell, Zhang Hai found people to prepare his new territory the next day. Zhang Hai's manor originally had a land area of 11,200 acres, including 9,200 acres of grassland, 1,000 acres of vineyards, and more than 1,000 acres of forest. 1 acre was equal to 6 acres, which was 4,046 square meters, or 0.004 square kilometers. Zhang Hai's original manor had a land area of 10 square kilometers. How big was it? This was because Zhang Hai's manor was relatively long and narrow. From the map, the width was about 2 kilometers, nearly 3 kilometers, and the length was about 4 kilometers. If one were to calculate according to the domestic city's public transport, from one end of Zhang Hai's manor to the other, there were about 8 stops. If one were to drive at 40 kilometers per hour, it would take 10 minutes. This time, Zhang Hai bought 2 large pieces of land. Among them, the first batch of land that Old George sold to Zhang Hai was 8,640 acres. The land that Cotton Harris sold was 6,700 acres. In total, it was about 15,540 acres. Of course, it would only be more than this number, not less. This was because in the middle of the 2 ranches, in order to avoid any accidents, there would be a public area. But now, this area belonged to Zhang Hai. The land area of Zhonghai's manor was about 27,800 acres. According to the calculation of 0.004 square kilometers per acre, Zhonghai's manor was 111.2 square kilometers in total. According to the map, it was about 5 kilometers wide and more than 20 kilometers long. There were 40 bus stops. If one drove at 40 miles per hour, it would take half an hour to go from one side of Zhonghai's manor to the other side. Almost half of the land outside Winthrop belonged to Zhonghai. After passing Zhonghai's manor and walking for more than 10 kilometers, it would be another area. So, this large area was Zhonghai's territory. If Zhonghai wanted to walk from one end to the other, it would probably take him at least 2 hours. The next day after these people moved away, Zhonghai began to work on this piece of land. Although the grass was not in a hurry, other things still had to be done. For example, fences, alarm systems, monitoring systems, underground water veins, and so on. These had to be done well. So, Zhonghai still found the construction team in Winthrop and handed the work to them. Of course, although they had a good relationship, if they did not do well, Zhonghai would not let them have an easy time. They knew this and were very careful when they were doing it. The huge fences were because of the Americans. According to Zhonghai's words, if it was in China, he would have built a fence. He would have put up a barbed wire fence and put some broken glass on the wall. This was better than any other protection. But the Americans could not do it. The Americans built walls. This made them feel restricted. It was like a prison. So, in the United States, even if it was a prison, many of the prison walls were made of barbed wire instead of walls. So, Zhonghai still had to spend money to build a fence made of barbed wire. Of course, Zhonghai also made the fence very high. It was at least 3 meters high. The higher the fence, the safer he felt. Then, he connected electricity to it and set off alarms. Other than that, there was good news about the underground water veins. Because Winthrop had an abundance of underground water, they did not lack water here. Originally, every ranch on this piece of land had its own independent water supply system. Zhonghai only needed to spend a small amount of money to connect them together. These things cost a total of more than 3 million yuan. Naturally, Zhonghai couldn't be stingy with this small amount of money. After all, he had already spent tens of millions. As for the original cowshed, houses, and the like, Zhonghai picked a few good houses and kept them. Now that his family's business was getting bigger and bigger, he might be able to arrange some workers in the future. When that time comes, these villas would become workers' houses. As for the cowshed, stables, and the rest of the houses, Zhonghai tore them down. Zhonghai wanted to sell the grass on this piece of land, not for living. As for the clean grass, he would have to wait. In autumn, when the grass turned yellow, he would burn the entire land. Then, he would dig out the grass roots and wait for spring to replant the grass seeds. According to Zhonghai's estimation, the grass would grow again around the year after next. But Zhonghai was not worried. He would not do anything risky anyway. He would not make any risky investments. He would spend as much money as he had. He could afford to wait. Arranging work was a very easy thing. Zhonghai spent 3 days to arrange his work. After that, he started his life as a cripple again. Every day, he would lie down on his jade recliner. This feeling was great. But as the male lead, Zhonghai could not be paralyzed all day. Even if he did not go out looking for trouble, trouble would come looking for him. For example, today. Early in the morning, Mayor Worth called Zhonghai in Winthrop and told him that he would come over in the morning with a few guests. These guests wanted to discuss a business deal with Zhonghai. He was just the middleman. Zhonghai did not care much about what Mayor Wallace said. After all, it was a business deal, and Zhonghai did not need any business at the moment. But since it was Mayor Wallace, he could not give face to him, so he still agreed. After finishing his daily chores in the morning, he lay down on his recliner outside. Around 10 o'clock, 2 cars appeared outside the gate of Zhonghai's house. Because they had already informed the others that Mayor Wallace would be coming today, the women also knew. When they saw that it was Mayor Wallace's car, they let it pass. Mayor Wallace and the other car came to the parking lot in front of Zhonghai's villa. As the 2 cars stopped, a group of 8 people also got out of the cars. What surprised Zhonghai was that except for Mayor Wallace, The other 7 people were all Chinese. 2 of them had obvious leadership qualities. They walked with bulging stomachs, and their belts were tied up very high. There were so many people following them, and someone was even helping them carry teacups. As soon as they got out of the car, they looked like they were giving orders. To be honest, people like Zhang Hai were naturally not interested in officials and rich people. It might be because of his previous jealousy. Therefore, his first impression of these people was not very good. However, they were guests, so he could not continue to be paralyzed here. He sat up forcefully and then walked to these people in front of him. It's really beautiful here. As he walked closer, Zhang Hai also heard these people commenting on Zhang Hai's house. Although Zhang Hai's villa looked a bit out of place, it was still a product of the combination of Chinese and Western. Therefore, for some postmodern people, especially those who liked the Western Huaxia style, it was quite unique. Just like Qi Jia, Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yunchen felt strange when they saw Zhang Hai's house for the first time, but Qi Jia felt that it was very beautiful. Now, many of these people also felt that it was very beautiful. Zhang Hai was used to it, so it did not matter. Seeing Zhang Hai walk over, several people here stopped talking and looked at the 2 leaders and Mayor Wallace who walked forward. Zhang, let me introduce you. These 2 are leaders from Huaxia. This is Lu, Director Lu of XX Unit. This is Li, Deputy Director Li. It was not that Mayor Wallace did not know how to introduce people. In China, if it was introduced, naturally, the word deputy would be directly removed. However, in the United States, the words director and deputy director were different. In general, the most senior personnel used the word head, which meant leader. Deputy director used the word vice director, so it was easy to distinguish them. It was impossible to be subtle because they were different words. Fortunately, Deputy Director Li did not care about this. After hearing Mayor Wallace's introduction, he took the initiative to reach out his hand, took the hand that Zhang Hai had already shaken with Director Lu, and shook it enthusiastically. This is not the first time we have come to Winthrop. Brother Zhang's name is like thunder to our ears, but this is the first time we have met. We are loyal fans of your seafood. Looking at Zhang Hai, Deputy Director Li said with a smile. Hearing his words, Zhang Hai also smiled, and then led everyone into the villa. At this time in the villa, because they already knew that there would be people coming, Chia and the others were already prepared. Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yunchen stayed on the first floor with Aphrodite and Hilda. The other girls were either on the second floor or went to work. As soon as they saw everyone come in, the few women who were sitting on the sofa also stood up. When these people saw Feng Yunchen and the others, their eyes could not help but light up. Who doesn't love beautiful women? Especially the young people who followed them. For a moment, their eyes could not help but light up. Feng Yunchen and Ai Xiaoxi were called goddesses in China, and Aphrodite and Hilda were also quite good-looking. No wonder these guys had eyes. But fortunately, they knew that this was someone else's territory. Although they were very beautiful, they did not stare. However, he did not stare. Instead, after a glance, he found a spot and watched quietly. Chapter 785. Come and sit down. Tea or drink? Wine? The things I have here should be quite complete. Looking at the people in front of him, Zhang Hai smiled. He was not the kind of person who would dig out other people's eyes just because they looked at his woman, but he was definitely not willing to look at her lecherously. Fortunately, these people knew how to restrain themselves, so Zhang Hai just said a few words and then sat down at the head of a table that had been prepared long ago. Seeing Zhang Hai sitting there, the team members who followed here couldn't help but be speechless. Then they seemed to remember that they were not in China, so they sat down casually. As for Chief Lu and Chief Li, they didn't say anything. Just like these subordinates, they realized that they were not in China. Zhang Hai didn't need to be polite to them. How could they not realize it? No matter how well they educated their children, it was rare to see a domineering and arrogant aura from them. Their generation was all about making money quietly, and they didn't care about guns. So they didn't show anything on their faces at this time, and they sat casually at the table. After everyone had sat down, Zhang Hai asked the people in front of him. I drove today. Damn it, it's not easy to get a chance to get wine from you. Forget it. Give me a cup of tea. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Mayor Wallace couldn't help but slap his forehead and said with a face of annoyance. Since winning the award, the specialties of Zhang Hai's manor changed from seafood and beef to seafood, beef, and red wine. Especially the beef stewed with red wine. Wow, it was simply 1 + 1 = 2. It was at least equal to 4, 5, or 6. Mayor Wallace used to be a clerk, so he was not a cowboy or a fisherman. He didn't like to drink wine that was too strong. After drinking Zhang Hai's red wine once, he couldn't forget it. Of course, he also knew that Zhang Hai's wine was for sale, so he didn't come to ask Zhang Hai for wine. As for buying, he also knew very well that he couldn't afford it, so he came over at most for a while. Oh, is Brother Zhang's wine very good? We really haven't heard of it, we just know that your beef and seafood here are excellent. Hearing Mayor Wallace's words, Director Li also spoke with a smile. This bureau chief Lu was sent down by the higher-ups. Usually, he didn't care much about things. He was the so-called chief in charge of the general direction. Deputy Director Li, on the other hand, had started from the bottom. This time, they had come to talk to Zhang Hai. Of course, it was impossible to simply hand over the translation authority to the translator. Among the 7 of them, 6 of them were quite good at English. Only Director Lu's level was not good. 4 of them could communicate with foreigners fluently. Just now, although Mayor Wallace spoke quickly, they still heard it clearly. Hearing his words, Zhang Hai also smiled gently. My wine, I have no proof. Bring me a bottle. Hearing what Deputy Director Li said, Zhang Hai smiled. He wasn't showing off. Well, in fact, he was showing off. Anyway, these people can't find trouble with him. After saying something to Aphrodite next to him, Aphrodite went to the cold storage next to him and took out a bottle of red wine. Hilda also prepared some goblets for wine tasting, but when she handed out the goblets, 3 people refused. One was Mayor Wallace, another was the driver of the 7 people, and the last one was Director Lu. I'm not used to drinking red wine. I just heard little Zhang say that there is tea. I don't know if you can make me a cup of tea. Director Lu smiled shyly and pushed away the goblet handed by Hilda and said to Zhang Hai, Of course, there's no problem. I usually drink tea. Hearing Director Lu's words, Zhang Hai also smiled, then nodded to Aphrodite. Aphrodite took the kettle that had already boiled, then took out some tea leaves from the cabinet and put some into the teacups that Zhang Hai and Director Lu brought. This fragrance. Is this Longjing? Looking at the appearance of the tea leaves and the fragrance of the tea, Director Lu was stunned for a moment. Then, he sniffed carefully, and a trace of doubt flashed on his face. Because this is indeed Longjing, he can smell it, but this quality. Just by smelling it, he can feel that this tea is already more fragrant than the best Longjing sold on the market. What's going on? Good eyesight, Director Lu, try it. After Zhang Hai said with a smile, he motioned for Aphrodite to pour the water. The water Zhang Hai's was not ordinary water. The underground water in Winthrop was extremely rich. Zhang Hai's water was specially obtained from a spring. This spring was not big, and the source of the spring water was the Alabama mountain range. In other words, this was an authentic underground mountain spring water. When it was first drawn up, it was bone-chilling, even in summer. When it was first boiled, it had to be filtered, and the second time the water was boiled again before it was used to make tea. And his tea leaves were not ordinary either. They were picked from the tea leaves that he got from China. There was only a little this year, but fortunately, it was enough for Zhang Hai to drink, and it was enough for him to show off. The hot water was poured into the teacup, and in an instant, a strong bean fragrance floated out of the teacup. At this time, Deputy Director Li and some other people who were waiting to sober up couldn't help but have their eyes lit up. There were very few people in the system who didn't like tea, because as the saying goes, if the superiors liked it, the subordinates would follow suit. In order to have more common topics with the superiors, if the superiors liked tea, the subordinates would also like tea. In addition, it hadn't been long since Xueqi was founded, and the first generation of leaders didn't have any drinks to drink. They could only drink tea, so this tradition was slowly passed down. Now, among the 7 people, 4 knew tea. Can I also try the tea leaves? At this time, Deputy Director Li asked with a smile. Hearing his words, Zhang Hai also motioned for him to go ahead. After Deputy Director Li took the tea leaves, two people whispered to Aphrodite and asked for tea leaves. The first brew of the tea is not to drink. This is called tea washing. First, it is to wash off the dust on the tea leaves, and second, it is to make the tea leaves stretch out and show a better tea shape in the cup. Zhang Hai didn't know this at first. It was all taught by his grandfather Zhang Dihai. After the first brew, everyone began to drink the second brew. Zhang Hai didn't care, but Director Li's eyes lit up the moment he took a sip. This tea is good water, good tea, and has a trace of spirituality. When the tea entered the mouth, it carried a strong fragrance. The fragrance overflowed, and it also carried the unique non-bitter taste of Longjing tea. After the tea was swallowed, there was a strong aftertaste. At the same time, the tea carried spiritual energy. As soon as it entered the body, it would act on its own. Although it didn't have any damn effect, it would make people feel refreshed. At the same time, they would feel the cold air in their body rush out in an instant, making people feel particularly energetic. This tea. Good tea. After a long while, Deputy Director Li and the other two people who came with him let out a long breath. Then, Deputy Director Li said with a face full of emotion. He knew that Americans didn't like tea, so before he came, he had already thought that there wouldn't be any good tea. But now, after drinking it, he knew that he was wrong, very wrong. These tea leaves are too good. The quality of this tea is comparable to the tribute, and it even has a bit more spirituality than the tribute. Little Zhang's tea leaves are the best. At this time, Director Liu also slowly opened his eyes and said with a face full of emotion. When he said this, everyone became silent. This was because everyone knew that Bureau Chief Liu was sent down by the higher-ups to deal with the top issues in the country. If he said that Zhang Hai could be compared to the tribute tea, then it could be compared to the tribute tea. At this time, when they looked at Zhang Hai, they couldn't help but feel a little emotional. It was really terrifying. Zhang Hai really had everything here. Hey, it's just some of my tea trees. The wine is almost sober. Come and try my red wine. I'm not used to drinking it. I still like to drink beer, but foreigners who have drunk this thing say that it's good. You guys should try it too. Looking at the people in front of him, Zhang Hai smiled. He glanced at the wine that was almost sober and said to everyone. At this time, Hilda also came over with the wine and poured half a glass for each of them. It was not that Zhang Hai was stingy, but it was red wine. She only poured half a glass. In China, the rule of half a glass of tea for a full glass of wine was not applicable here. When these people who knew wine took a sip of Zhang Hai's red wine, their eyes lit up again. These people in the system naturally participated in all kinds of banquets. Red wine, white wine, beer, yellow wine, and foreign wine. It could be said that they had drunk all kinds of wine sold in the market. But now when they drank Zhang Hai's wine, their eyes almost popped out. This wine was too good. After tasting it carefully, not to mention anything else, it was definitely better than all the red wine in the country. Compared to the top foreign wine, it could be described with 4 words. They really couldn't imagine how Zhang Hai could have so many good things here. With tea and wine, Zhang Hai and these people were closer, but at the same time, they also knew that Zhang Hai's good things were not as simple as they seemed on the surface. I don't know why you came back to see me. After tasting the tea and wine, and sitting for a while, Zhang Hai didn't have time to accompany these guys here, so he took the initiative to ask. If they didn't say anything, then Zhang Hai could only ask himself. Little Zhang, a straightforward person doesn't speak in riddles. This time, we came here mainly to buy land from you. Looking at Zhang Hai, Director Li hesitated for a moment and said to Zhang Hai, but as soon as his voice fell, Zhang Hai frowned. Chapter 786. Hearing Director Liu's words, Zhang Hai couldn't help but frown deeply. This was because everyone knew that Zhang Hai's land would not be sold. Although Zhang Hai wasn't as obsessed with land as the older generation in China, the land he bought wasn't for farming or playing, but to make money. His manor made $2 billion a year from selling cattle, and the other manors made almost $2 billion a year from selling grass. That was $4 billion a year. Now someone came to him and said that they wanted to buy his land? Was he crazy? Sorry, I don't plan to sell the land. He shook his head directly. This wasn't China. If the country came and said that they wanted to expropriate your land, It would be useless to say anything because the land belonged to the country, it was just rented to you. But this was the United States, and this land was bought by Zhang Hai, so he definitely wouldn't sell it. $4 billion a year, that was $40 billion in 10 years. Was he crazy to sell this thing? Don't be in a hurry to refuse. It's just a piece of land. It doesn't have any special meaning. We will definitely give you a satisfactory answer. Why don't you take a look at the price first? Hearing Zhang Hai directly refuse him, Deputy Director Li smiled and then said to Zhang Hai. Then he took out a piece of paper from his briefcase. It was clearly written on the paper that they wanted to buy Zhang Hai's land, and they were prepared to take out $1 billion. Are you robbing me? Looking at the words on the paper, Zhang Hai couldn't help but laugh. Did they do any work? Want to buy my land for $1 billion? Their brains must be flooded with water. Little Zhang, how can you say that? 1 billion is the price estimated by our experts. That's a lot. You bought this land for $280 million, including the sea field. We don't want the sea field. We only want the land. Including the land you bought this time, the land here is worth at most $300 million. 1 billion is already quite a ridiculous price. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Deputy Director Li smiled and said to him, Since you're here, you should know that my cattle can be sold for $2 billion a year. My grass can be sold for several $100 million a year. Now that my manor has been expanded, my grass can be sold for $2 billion a year. That's more than $4 billion a year. $5 billion a year. Even if you deduct taxes, I still have $3 billion in income, and that's just for 1 year. But you want to spend $1 billion to buy my manor? Haha, I can only say that you're thinking too much. Zhang Hai shook his head as he spoke in a very flat tone. After hearing Zhang Hai's words, many people sitting here couldn't help but gasp. In fact, it wasn't the first time that the people sitting here came to Winthrop. To be precise, those who came to Winthrop for the first time were from the Bureau, but those who came here were not high-ranking officials. At that time, they knew that Zhang Hai was rich. Later, the Bureau organized a few more trips here, and then some people with economic brains saw the advantages of Winthrop. It was very close to Boston and not far from New York, and the things here were very good. It could be said that this was a good place for domestic tourism and vacations. So they thought for a while and decided to buy a piece of land here and build a resort. The best choice was Zhang Hai's manor. Zhang Hai's manor was big enough and had abundant water resources. Most importantly, the basic equipment was almost ready. As long as they took over, it wouldn't take long for them to open for business. So they found Mayor Wallace and wanted to talk about buying Zhang Hai's manor. Although Mayor Wallace knew that Zhang Hai would never sell his manor, he also didn't dare to offend the Bureau in the country, so he could only act as a bridge. As for whether Zhang Hai would sell it or not, it was still up to him. But when Mayor Wallace heard that this person was only going to buy Zhang Hai's manor for $1 billion, he knew that this deal was over. After these people heard Zhang Hai's words, they couldn't help but look at each other. They knew that Zhang Hai was rich, but they didn't expect Zhang Hai to be so rich. An income of $5 billion a year. God, what the hell is this? According to Zhang Hai, he would be the richest man in the world in a few years? Thinking of this, they couldn't help but look at each other. They clearly saw a trace of disbelief in each other's eyes. They thought that Zhang Hai was just talking nonsense. He wanted to raise the price. How about this? We'll add 200 million won. 2 billion, what do you think? If it's really as you said, selling cattle and grass can sell for so much money, 2 billion can buy a bigger manor, and then your income will be more, right? Looking at Zhang Hai, Deputy Director Li hesitated for a moment, then added 200 million to Zhang Hai. You don't believe me. It seems like you don't believe me. Let's not talk about 5 billion or 4 billion first. Last year, I sold cattle for $1.5 billion US. I paid taxes, so if you want to check you can easily find out. This year, not only did I sell cattle, but I also sold fish and grass. Not to mention other things, I can still earn $2 billion US. When the time comes, besides the taxes, I can also earn $2 billion US. In other words, your $2 billion US is only enough for me to earn for a year. Do you think I will sell my foundation for a year's worth of money? Looking at the crowd in front of him, Zhang Hai shook his head and said indifferently. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, the faces of the people here were a little ugly. They originally thought that this should be a sure thing, but they didn't expect Zhang Hai's foundation to be so solid. An income of more than $1 billion a year. God, the people here may not be able to earn $100 million in their lifetime. Of course, this refers to the ordinary employees. As for the rest, it's not something Zhang Hai can comment on, but he certainly won't sell this place. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, the people here looked at each other. According to what Zhang Hai said now, he can make more than $1 billion a year, and that's after taxes. If they really want to buy it, they will have to pay at least a decade's price. More than 10 billion? How is this possible? It's absolutely impossible for them to spend more than $10 billion to buy Zhang Hai's manor. And most importantly, they are only taking over the manor to open a holiday village. How many years will it take for them to earn that much money? So after Director Liu and Deputy Director Li looked at each other, they both shook their heads. We really didn't expect little Zhang to make so much money here. We came abruptly, but little Zhang, have you ever considered getting involved in the real estate project? Looking at Zhang Hai, Deputy Director Li also took back his somewhat embarrassing proposal. What a joke. An acquisition proposal worth $10 billion was not something they could decide. But although they couldn't buy Zhang Hai's land, they could consider cooperating with Zhang Hai to develop real estate. Real estate. Hearing the three sons, the first person Zhang Hai thought of was the current richest man in Huaxia. This was because he started out in real estate. When Zhang Hai was a farmer, he looked down on those who started out in real estate. But when he became a rich person, he didn't have much hostility towards those who started out in real estate. Now hearing Deputy Director Li's words, Zhang Hai was stunned for a moment, then shook his head gently. This is a bit unrealistic. You know, this is the United States. Even if we build a house here, can we sell it? Looking at the people in front of him, Zhang Hai asked with some doubts. Anyway, if it was him, if his roots were in Huaxia, he would never buy a house in the United States. Of course it was possible to buy a house. Many people in Huaxia had real estate in the United States. The United States was still very relaxed when it came to buying a house, unlike China, where there was a need for a household registration, identification, and so on. Here one could just sign a purchase and sale agreement. It was as simple as renting a house. Of course, the premise was that one had enough money and time. Our houses are mainly targeted at Huaxia tourists. You know, people in Huaxia are the least short of money recently, and the houses we sell here may not be more expensive than those in some cities in China. After all, the land price here is right there. Originally, our idea was to buy your place, build a resort on the seaside and your current grassland, and then build several residential areas in other areas, high-rise or villa communities. But now, it seems that we can't buy it. However, there is still some land in Winthrop. We represent the country, so it's not very good to invest money to build land here. But you can, so we can cooperate. Looking at Zhang Hai in front of him, Deputy Director Li chuckled, then said very seriously. He was very sincere and also telling the truth. If they built a residential area in Winthrop, they could sell it for $1,000 per square meter, which was more than 6,000 yuan, and they could earn it back. What's more, they couldn't sell it for $1,000, at least 10,000 yuan per square meter. This was the average house price in some first-tier cities in China. In the city center, it was easy to sell for 20,000 or 30,000 yuan, but in places like Hang City, Shenzhen, Shanghai, and Beijing. What a joke! In Beijing, the second ring road was a good place. How could you buy it for less than 100,000 yuan per square meter? Of course, he was talking about RMB. But in Winthrop, it was $2,000 per square meter. 12,000 yuan per square meter. You can rest and play here, and if your child is studying in Boston, you can come over to accompany him. It was really a good place. Chapter 787. Director Liu and Deputy Director Li didn't have lunch at Zhang Hai's place. After talking to Zhang Hai, they left. They would have to listen to Zhang Hai's opinion on what to do. After they left, Zhang Hai also fell into contemplation. Sitting under the big tree at the door, he kept thinking about what Bureau Chief Liu and Deputy Bureau Chief Li said to him today, about whether or not to invest in real estate. According to what they said, Zhang Hai would make a lot of money if he got into real estate. In fact, Zhang Hai had a rough idea of how much money he could make. Building a high-rise building with 20 or 30 floors would cost $30 to $40 million. Including the cost of acquiring the land, one building would cost $20 million, which would add up to about $50 million. But in a building, there would be 2 households per floor, and each household would average 120 square meters. There would be 4 entrances to each building, and 30 floors would mean 240 households. $2,000 per square meter, which would be $1.44 million per house. 240 households would mean $345.6 million. Why was real estate so valuable? That was why it was so valuable. Even if they increased the investment and spent $100 million to build a building, even if the quality was so good that it made people's hair stand on end, they would still earn $200 million after the construction. Of course, this money would not all go to the developers. The government officials would definitely get some of the money as well. But if Zhang Hai took the lead here, he would approve the land here, then let the local people come over to build it, and then sell it to the rich people in the country. Zhang Hai would get at least half of the profits, which would be $100 million. After deducting the taxes, Zhang Hai would make about $10 million per house. Naturally, there couldn't be only one building in a community. If they built 20 or 30 buildings, they would make $200 or $300 million. To be honest, he would be lying if he said he wasn't tempted by the money. More importantly, if the community was built, it would attract more people to settle down in Winthrop. In that case, the people who came to buy things wouldn't just be tourists, but ordinary household expenses. This would greatly increase Winthrop's expenses. Not only would the sales of furniture, decorations, and clothes increase greatly. He finally understood why Mayor Wallace didn't lure them here even though he knew Zhang Hai wouldn't sell the land. Firstly, it was because he didn't want to offend these rich people. Secondly, it would be beneficial for them if the community was built. To be honest, Zhang Hai would be lying if he said he wasn't tempted by the hundreds of millions of dollars in business. Although he made a lot of money in a year, the problem was that it would be beneficial for him, the other party, and Winthrop. But vaguely, Zhang Hai felt that something was wrong, which was why he was so conflicted. Fortunately, Chief Lu and the others knew that this matter couldn't be rushed, so they let Zhang Hai think about it carefully. After a simple lunch, Zhang Hai continued to lie on the recliner and think. But to be honest, he was really conflicted and didn't know what to do. Unknowingly, the sky gradually darkened. After dinner, Zhang Hai and the others went back to rest. Tonight, the ones in charge of accompanying Zhang Hai were Qi Jia, Sheila, and Ohelia. Recently, Zhang Hai and the others had gotten used to the rotation system. From Sunday to Friday, they changed people every day. On Sunday, Valentina and the others came back and occupied Zhang Hai's time. Of course, during the day, it was different. Usually, Zhang Hai was quite concerned about these things. After all, a dragon's nature was quite good. So whenever a woman teased him, Zhang Hai always couldn't control his primitive power. But today, Zhang Hai seemed to have something on his mind. After dealing with Qi, Zhang Hai also dealt with Sheila and Ohelia. When they fell asleep, Zhang Hai and Qi Jia were still fighting. Perhaps sensing that something was wrong with Zhang Hai, Qi Jia, who was straddling Zhang Hai, couldn't help but let the battle continue. At the same time, she patted Zhang Hai's chest. "Why are you acting so weird today? You seemed absent-minded when you were doing this." Looking at Zhang Hai, Qi Jia asked with some doubts. Hearing her words, Zhang Hai also returned to his senses temporarily and looked at her apologetically. "I'm always thinking about other things. What those two said to me when they left today made me hesitate." Touching Qi Jia's ankle with both hands, Zhang Hai thought for a while. He couldn't figure it out by himself, so it was better to ask someone else. "What's there to hesitate about? Do you want to enter this industry?" Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Qi Jia couldn't help but stop. She wiped the sweat on her forehead, then looked at Zhang Hai strangely and asked, "Well, it's not that I can't join, because it's really profitable. I did some calculations this afternoon. Even if the quality of the buildings is the best, I can still make more than 100 million yuan per building, which is 3 billion yuan per building. After converting it to US dollars and including taxes, I can still make about 300 million yuan per building. It should be a profitable business, but I still feel that something is wrong. Hearing Qi Jie's words, Zhang Hai looked at her with his posture. Indeed, Zhang Hai really didn't understand. Such a profitable business, why don't they do it themselves and let you do it? Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Qi Jie also looked at him and asked with some confusion. According to Zhang Hai, they can still make so much money with the best quality. If the quality only meets the requirements, they can make at least 50% more. Such a good business, why don't they do it themselves and let Zhang Hai do it? This made her a little confused. Because this is the United States. If the government of Huaxia comes and says that we want to buy a piece of land and build a community here, the government of the United States will definitely not agree. You know, the government of the United States is very particular about the sovereignty of land. If the government of Huaxia buys a piece of land here, it will definitely be a problem whether the land belongs to Huaxia or the United States. Hearing Qi Jie's words, Zhang Hai also understood why these people wanted him to make money. It was because of Zhang Hai's connections in Massachusetts. It was because Zhang Hai could dig out land from the hands of the United States government. This was the reason why they joined him. You also know that this is the United States. Have you thought about it? If you buy land and build a building here, if anything goes wrong, will you be the person that the government of the United States will look for? You can't have forgotten that you have a manor here, right? Why do you want to let your manor be threatened for a business deal of $300 million? Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Qi Jie sat on his lap and asked him curiously. Hearing Qi Jie's words, Zhang Hai instantly felt that there was something wrong in his mind. He immediately figured it out. Yes, he only cared about the benefits, but didn't see the threat behind the benefits. The current relationship between Huaxia and the United States, there was no way to talk about it here. If Huaxia used this place to do something to the United States government, then Zhang Hai, the person who bought the land, would bear the brunt of it. Now, Zhang Hai was living well here. First, he paid taxes well, and second, he didn't have any weaknesses that could be used against him. In this world, money was the most important thing. One was Walmart, and the other was the royal family of Du Feimin. Although these were Zhang Hai's protection, Zhang Hai didn't believe that no one was interested in his manor. Now, Zhang Hai didn't have a tail, so they couldn't catch Zhang Hai's problem. But once Zhang Hai had any weaknesses that could be used against him in the hands of those in power in the United States, then his money and his foundation would be destroyed. Zhang Hai wasn't the kind of person who would sacrifice himself for the country. Perhaps some people would say that he didn't have the right values. Without the country, there wouldn't be a home. Without a home, there wouldn't be him. Everything he had belonged to the country. It was only right that he shed his blood for the country. But now, Zhang Hai didn't just have to think about himself. His family also had to think about. If there was an accident and his whole family died, who could he reason with? $300 million wasn't a small amount, but for Zhang Hai, it wasn't indispensable. Once he thought this through, Zhang Hai understood. I was almost trapped. You're still the best. You saw through it with one glance. Zhang Hai said with a smile as he patted Qi Jie's butt. Then he picked her up, put her on the bed, and began to attack her. This heart disease was finally cured. He also had to thank Qi Jie properly. And in Zhang Hai's gratitude, Qi Jie quickly reached an indescribable state. At this time, Zhang Hai also let out a long breath and then stopped. You really didn't give me any time to prepare. Yi gave Zhang Hai a strange look. Qi Jie patted his arm. In fact, Qi Jie was quite happy that Zhang Hai would listen to her. At least, Zhang Hai was the type to listen to advice. Hey, you're all sweaty. Let's go take a shower together. Hearing her words, Zhang Hai also said to her with a smile. No, this thing stays in the body. The chances of pregnancy are higher. You don't want a baby. Glancing at Zhang Hai, Qi Jie lazily prepared to go to sleep, but Zhang Hai directly picked her up. What's the hurry? I'll get you a new one. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Qi Jie couldn't help but blush and pat his back. This guy is really in a hurry. That night, Qi Jie didn't know when she fell asleep. She just vaguely felt that when she fell asleep, the sky seemed to be almost bright. As for Zhang Hai, he also thanked her properly. Early the next morning, after Zhang Hai got up, he called Deputy Director Li and rejected his proposal. Just as Qi Jie said, Zhang Hai didn't lack money. Contentment is a long way to go. He didn't want to earn that 300 million. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.